With cold finality, Crown Prince Felix ruthlessly shatters his engagement to Lady Ophelia, declaring his absolute intention to marry another. Leaving his former fiancée completely frozen in shock, the prince casually walks away with his new love interest. Radiating joy, the new girl happily accepts the proposal as Felix affectionately calls out to his beloved Alicia. Stranded alone in her elaborate dark gown, Ophelia stares at the departing couple as her entire world crumbles around her. Completely isolated in the courtyard, she wonders just how far back she must retrace her steps to understand where everything went wrong. Their arranged political engagement began perfectly, blossoming into blissful love right up until they turned 16 and entered the academy. Everything changed the moment Alicia arrived, shining brightly as an honor student of humble birth. Brushing off Ophelia's attempts to coordinate outfits, Felix coldly rejected her request to escort her to the upcoming soirée just before his birthday. Instead of spending time with his fiancée, Felix blushed wildly and accepted Alicia's company for lunch while completely ignoring Ophelia. Clutching her chest in a spur of spiteful jealousy, Ophelia watched helplessly as the humble girl gradually grew closer to Prince Felix. Cruel whispers and mocking gossip swirled through the nobility as onlookers pitted Lady Ophelia for losing her prince to another. Staring at Alicia wearing a dress gifted by Felix, Ophelia drowned in sheer misery and foreign emotions beyond her wildest imagination. Shattering the fantasy, a sobbing Japanese gamer wails uncontrollably over how callously the prince gave Ophelia the cold shoulder. Clutching her console in bed, the furious player condemns the crown prince for shamelessly pursuing another girl when he already has a devoted fiancée. Determined to save the doomed Otome game VILLAINESS, she snatches up her phone and resolves to contact the developers. Knowing she might be a nuisance, the fired-up fan furiously types out a plea to put her money where her mouth is. Suddenly shifting to a lavish room, a maid proudly announces she is done styling Lady Ophelia, praising her beautiful appearance. Blushing at Karen's brazen compliments, Ophelia shakes her head and doubts she will be the center of attention at the upcoming ceremony. Steeling her nerves, she mentally braces herself for the school entrance ceremony where the gears of fate will finally be set in motion. Flashing back 9 years, a 7-year-old Ophelia stands paralyzed as her parents joyfully announce her officially fixed engagement to Crown Prince Felix. At the mere sound of the prince's name, a blinding spark of realization violently shatters the young girl's innocence. While her parents assume she is simply rendered speechless with surprise, massive and confusing revelations surface rapidly in Ophelia's mind. Overwhelmed by the crushing weight of sudden memories, the little girl collapses entirely, terrifying her parents into screaming for a doctor. Her past life as a Japanese citizen comes flooding back, reminding her that she had already cleared Felix's romance route in a video game. The fantasy game, Frisia, followed a heroine who awakens shrine maiden powers to protect the world during her 3 years at the academy. To her absolute horror, the memories reveal she has been reincarnated as Ophelia Laralake, the tragic supporting villainess of the story. Accepting her bizarre reality, she acknowledges the terrifying irony of being thrust into the exact position of Prince Felix's doomed fiancée. Gazing at the metaphorical start screen, Ophelia knows destiny has finally dawned and the relentless game has officially begun. Pouring a fresh cup of tea, Karen smiles warmly and notes that even her mistress gets butterflies in her stomach on the day of the entrance ceremony. Sipping her tea with a heavy heart, Ophelia admits her terrible nervousness since her entire fate rests solely on the heroine's choice of route. If the heroine manages to tie the knot with Felix, Ophelia faces a terrifying future of either brutal confinement or complete exile. Praying to avoid the bad ending, she confidently rationalizes that her past life as a commoner makes banishment far more agreeable than being locked up. When the terrifying truth of her fate first hit her as a child, the intense anxiety was almost too much for her small body to handle. Yet during those dark times, a young Felix kindly visited her every single day to bring her crimson freesias and assuage her uncertainties. Hot tears of genuine gratitude and emotion streamed down her young face as his gentle presence anchored her soul. Though she merely liked him as a game character before, she now loves Prince Felix deeply from the absolute bottom of her heart. Driven by this fierce love, she poured relentless effort into studying and polishing her beauty, desperate for a shot at happiness as a queen worthy of him. Draining her teacup with absolute conviction, she vows that even as a villainess, she still possesses the absolute right to fight for her own happiness. Knowing that the heroine and all key characters are gathering today, Ophelia realizes her ultimate fate will be determined at the academy. Flashing a radiant and confident smile at Karen, Lady Ophelia strides forward to face her destiny head-on. Stepping into the grand chapel, Ophelia psychs herself up for the entrance ceremony, marveling at the grace of the gathered nobles and talented commoners. Prince Felix warmly calls out to his fiancée, inviting Ophelia to come sit right next to him. Ophelia's heart pounds wildly as Felix explains he wanted to escort her from the dormitory but guys are strictly prohibited. When Ophelia tells him not to worry, Felix admits it feels somewhat lonely to hear that, prompting Ophelia to fondly compare him to a sad puppy. Remembering that the game's Ophelia bullied the heroine, the reincarnated villainess guiltily vows to build a harmonious relationship with her to avoid a broken engagement. Felix softly asks what's the matter as Ophelia snaps out of her scrunched-up grimace and quickly dismisses his concern. He gently asks if she feels nervous about the ceremony, while Ophelia dreads the inevitable day those tender eyes grow completely cold. She agrees with his observation, internally wondering if she will have the strength to bear her impending heartbreak when the time finally comes. The announcer suddenly calls for the new students to take their seats, causing Ophelia's chest to physically ache with anxiety. A young girl urgently asks to share the bench, and Ophelia politely gestures for her to go right ahead. The girl cheerfully thanks her for saving her from a pickle, while Ophelia internally panics upon realizing she just bumped into the actual heroine. Putting on a polite smile, Ophelia officially introduces herself as the girl introduces herself as Alicia. Ophelia stares in stunned silence, instantly recognizing the familiar portrait from the Otome game cover and bracing herself for the real deal. She remembers that Alicia is a commoner admitted for possessing light magic, destined to receive the Shrine Maiden's blessings and wield holy magic mid-game. Felix suddenly chimes in to greet Alicia, who gasps in absolute shock upon realizing she is standing before the Crown Prince. Ophelia swoons over how Felix never puts on airs, warmly encouraging Alicia to speak to him freely as a fellow student. Alicia brightens immediately, cheerfully declaring she is pleased to make his acquaintance. To the villainess's absolute bewilderment, the heroine enthusiastically praises Ophelia's gorgeous, glossy long hair. Ophelia graciously returns the compliment by praising Alicia's adorable bright hair, genuinely wondering if the heroine truly is a good girl. A serene smile blossoms on Ophelia's face as the tension momentarily melts away. Just as Ophelia sighs in relief that things are going smoothly, Alicia apologizes for dropping something by her feet. Ophelia kindly retrieves a cute, feminine pen and hands it back to the smiling heroine. Alicia's expression suddenly darkens as she accuses Lady Ophelia of being incredibly unkind for ruining one of her favorite pens. Utterly bewildered, Ophelia stares blankly at the snapped pen resting in her palm, knowing it was in excellent condition just a moment ago. The heroine stubbornly insists Ophelia broke it on purpose, while Ophelia frantically points out she never even touched the broken part. Refusing to start a petty quarrel, Ophelia forces a tight smile and swallows her frustration, grimly choosing to grit her teeth and bear the false accusation. Suddenly, an elegant hand extends from behind Ophelia, smoothly presenting a pristine pen to Lady Alicia. Prince Felix seamlessly interrupts the tension, generously offering Alicia his own pen to replace her broken one. He quickly brushes off the gesture as the ceremony begins, leaving Alicia blushing fiercely as she vows to treasure his pen for the rest of her life. Ophelia furiously fumes in silence, noting that Alicia practically accepted the borrowed pen as a permanent gift with absolute nerve. The announcer formally congratulates the new students, but Ophelia only sees a bleak and thorny path looming ahead of her. Plagued by these intense anxieties, her harrowing new life at the academy officially begins. Later, an ecstatic Alicia arrives at Class A, marking the peaceful first day of school where the game's actual plot commences. Prince Felix flashes a handsome smile and politely escorts Lady Ophelia toward their new classroom. The door clicks open, revealing a beautifully illuminated classroom filled with empty desks and dancing sunlight. Alicia stares wide-eyed at the room, completely mesmerized by the stunning sights. She quickly apologizes for getting carried away, entirely overwhelmed by the beautiful windows and lace curtains. Ophelia reassures her kindly while internally exploding with hardcore gamer excitement over standing in the main setting of her favorite game. Thrilled to physically experience the world she once saw on a screen, Ophelia happily claims a seat by the window. Ophelia genuinely tells Felix she looks forward to their time together, absolutely delighted when he chooses the seat right next to hers. Alicia confidently wedges herself right next to Prince Felix, sending a massive shock through Ophelia as she realizes the heroine might already have her sights set on him. Ophelia notes that Alicia constantly tries to converse with Felix on the way to class, likely because the prince is currently her only viable capture target. A dark-haired, glasses-wearing student formally greets Prince Felix, expressing his eager anticipation for their next 3 years together at the academy. Ophelia immediately recognizes Klaus Delacour, another game capture target in their year, and cordially exchanges pleasant greetings with him. Staring awestruck, she mentally reviews Klaus's impressive background as the Prime Minister's son and a popular defensive water magic user who cuts a striking figure in his uniform. Alicia eagerly introduces herself as the new honor student, firmly grasping Klaus's hand in a surprisingly bold handshake that catches him off guard. Klaus smiles and warmly welcomes Alicia, acknowledging her rare talent for light magic and expressing his eagerness to elevate the kingdom alongside her. Observing this smooth interaction, Ophelia realizes Klaus has already been briefed about the honor student, unsurprising for the sharp son of the Prime Minister. She remembers that Class A is an elite assembly of royalty and the brightest nobles, meaning the academically talented honor student is a highly special case exempt from tuition. As Klaus offers his future assistance and returns to his seat, Ophelia braces herself for a highly challenging school year packed with incredibly outstanding individuals. Watching Klaus walk away, she notes that 2 upperclassmen capture targets have yet to appear but will inevitably cross paths with them sooner or later. Jolting back to reality, Ophelia overhears Alicia brazenly inviting Prince Felix to lunch to thank him for a pen he gave her earlier at the auditorium. Clenching her fists, Ophelia compares Alicia to a predator eyeing its prey, furious that the girl is asking out her fiancé right in front of her while showing off a lunchbox. Staring at the girl's back, the reincarnated villainess remembers how painful it must have been for the original Ophelia to quietly watch them hit it off from the sidelines. To everyone's surprise, Felix politely praises Alicia's homemade meal but smoothly rejects her invitation by stating he already has plans. Utterly bewildered by this deviation from the game's script, Ophelia watches Alicia awkwardly accept the rejection while she frantically tries to recall how the original event played out. Gasping in shock, Ophelia remembers that Felix is actually supposed to share a lunchbox with her today, wondering if she simply let the plans slip her mind. The bell rings, prompting Felix to flash a radiant smile as he instructs everyone to take their seats for the start of class. Turning his attention back before they sit down, Felix kindly asks Ophelia if she has a moment to spare. Walking together towards their destination, Ophelia urgently racks her brain to remember the specifics of the crucial lunchtime event as noon approaches. Arriving at a specific courtyard bench, she recognizes the exact backdrop where the game's villainess is destined to bully the heroine on the first day of school. In the original timeline, the heroine joins them for lunch, prompting Ophelia to react viciously the moment she lays eyes on the commoner's food. The original villainess glares down at the meal, brutally dismissing it as completely unpalatable. Realizing she forgot the lunchbox needed to trigger the scene, a panicked Ophelia resolves to keep the peace and say nothing aggressive, wondering if the event has been averted. Suddenly, Felix beams with pride and presents a massive, beautifully arranged lunchbox, revealing he woke up early to try his hand at cooking for the very first time. Blushing warmly, Felix admits he had help from the head chef and apologizes for its unappetizing look, leaving Ophelia completely wowed by his earnest effort. Deeply touched by his warm gesture, she assures him that appearances don't matter, completely overjoyed just knowing her prince made it by hand. Smiling softly, she genuinely appreciates the sweet gesture, moved that he tried his best at something he isn't good at simply to make her happy. As they prepare to eat the handmade meal, Felix kindly offers her his handkerchief. Declaring she wants to savor every last bite, Ophelia eagerly prepares to tuck in as they wish each other bon appetit. Suddenly, the sound of frantic panting and rushing footsteps interrupts their peaceful moment. Alicia bursts onto the scene with an energetic shout, triumphantly discovering the pair having lunch on the courtyard bench. Carrying her own lunchbox, the heroine cheerfully announces she made it just in time before they could tuck in. Without waiting for an invitation, Alicia forcefully wedges herself onto the bench right next to Felix, leaving Ophelia completely stunned. Disoriented by Alicia's wildly aggressive approach, Ophelia recalls that her own heavy-handed choices while playing the game might have fueled this chaotic behavior. Snapping back to the present, she zeroes in on the lunchbox resting in the brazen heroine's lap. A wave of dread washes over the reincarnated villainess as she realizes the infamous bullying event might have just begun. Flashing back to the original game script, she visualizes the cruel moment where the villainess coldly declares the heroine's food completely unpalatable. The memory continues with the villainess viciously mocking the girl, stating there is no way the crown prince could possibly eat something prepared by a stranger he just met. The original script concludes with a wicked sneer as the villainess suggests it would be terrible if the commoner's food contained poison. Ophelia remembers watching this exact scenario unfold countless times in the game, where she is falsely accused of being unkind. The heroine stands before them, trembling as she holds back her false tears. Just as scripted, Prince Felix immediately rushes to comfort the crying commoner. Ophelia realizes with a jolt that this is the pivotal scene designed to cement her status as the story's villainess. Determined to rewrite her fate, Ophelia crosses her arms and flashes a dazzling, confident smile. Panicking over her forgotten lines, Ophelia realizes that antagonizing the heroine now would ruin everything, so she decides to treat her kindly instead. Flashing a brilliant smile, Ophelia brushes off the tension, internally cheering at her chance to secure a peaceful life. Changing the subject smoothly, Ophelia cheerfully notes that Alicia also brought a lunchbox for the beautiful weather. Alicia stares back in silence, a strange expression crossing her features. Mockingly, the heroine questions if Ophelia is simply bad at cooking despite being a girl. Alicia boldly criticizes the rolled omelette as an amateur attempt, leaving Felix visibly shocked by her sheer audacity. Realizing Alicia thinks she cooked the meal, Ophelia holds her tongue, noting that the heroine is blatantly trying to insult her. Felix chuckles awkwardly, noting that Lady Alicia certainly doesn't mince her words. Stepping between them, Ophelia demands to know if Alicia truly intended for Prince Felix to eat such a meal. Furious at the disrespect, Ophelia firmly reminds the girl that the crown prince cannot simply accept food from someone he just met. Though she longs for tranquility, Ophelia refuses to let Prince Felix be exposed to potential poison. Rebuked, Alicia lowers her head and begins trembling in what appears to be mounting anger or impending tears. A dark, knowing smirk suddenly curves across the heroine's lips. Shocked to hear Alicia steal her own villainous lines from the game, Ophelia gasps in disbelief. Taking a bite of the food, Ophelia praises the nutritional value and finest quality of the ingredients. Leaning into her villainous role, Ophelia mocks the commoner for being unable to appreciate such a magnificent lunchbox. With a delicate bite, she sighs in absolute bliss at the delectable taste. Since Felix made it specially for her, Ophelia finds the organically produced and lightly seasoned eggs absolutely divine. Meeting Felix's gaze, she warmly declares that above all else, the meal was made with love. Embarrassed by her own uncharacteristic outburst, Ophelia quickly apologizes for ruining the mood and speaking like a true villainess. Watching the tense exchange, Ophelia notes that Felix is supposed to console the heroine here, but doubts it will happen now. Gently, Felix speaks up to comfort the supposedly distressed girl. To Ophelia's absolute shock, Felix defends his fiancée instead, prompting Alicia to frantically deny that she was crying. Faced with a crying heroine and a supposedly villainous noble, Felix makes his choice. Ophelia stares intently, knowing exactly who he is scripted to choose. According to the game's script, Ophelia's interference should prevent Felix from eating the lunch, but Alicia's lemon jelly is meant to catch his eye. Playing her trump card, Alicia offers Felix his favorite lemon jelly with a sweet, expectant blush. Felix accepts the jar with a polite smile, precisely matching his programmed response from the game. Flashing a dazzling smile, Felix happily confirms that it is indeed his favorite dessert. Suddenly, a flicker of genuine shock crosses Alicia's face. Catching the heroine's unexpected surprise, Ophelia narrows her eyes in sharp suspicion. A terrifying realization dawns on Ophelia as she wonders if the heroine is also a reincarnated player. If Alicia possesses memories of her past life, her aggressive and calculated behavior finally makes perfect sense. Recalling her deep, genuine love for Felix that blossomed far beyond her past life as a fan, Ophelia dreads the heroine's next move. Terrified of having her beloved stolen away, Ophelia remembers the agonizing scene where Felix abandons her, vowing to fight for her happiness. Presenting a beautifully crafted jar of lemon jelly, Felix kindly offers Ophelia a spoon so they can enjoy the head chef's dessert together. Flustered by the sweet gesture, Ophelia eagerly accepts, silently wondering how he knew it was her favorite treat while fully aware from her past life that it is actually his. Felix flashes a radiant smile and declares the jelly even more delicious when shared, leaving Ophelia puzzled about what happened to Alicia's homemade lunchbox. Sitting peacefully on the bench, Ophelia grimly recalls that the game's heroine is incredibly persistent and unlikely to give up easily. She realizes she inadvertently left the burning question of the heroine's potential reincarnation completely unanswered due to her own hesitation. Though a direct confrontation would be the most efficient strategy, Ophelia admits she couldn't bring herself to ask for fear of driving herself into a terrifying dead end. A solitary freesia petal drifts through the air, gently brushing past Ophelia's face as she contemplates her precarious situation. Seeking answers after school, Ophelia arrives at the secluded flowerbeds tucked away quietly behind the main academy building. Surveying the garden, she notes that this hidden spot is highly important in the world of Frisia because of its abundant magical blooms. Spotting a single blossoming flower amidst the greenery, Ophelia confirms her suspicions that the garden is already reacting to the character's emotions. She remembers that the garden acts as a magical indicator, with the blooming flower's colors corresponding to the capture target's rising affections for the heroine. Dropping into a gloomy crouch, Ophelia laments the solitary red blossom, realizing Felix's affection must have risen after Alicia gifted him the lemon jelly. Noting several other buds peeping out, Ophelia quickly calculates a strategy to steer the heroine towards the other capture targets so everyone can attain their happy endings. Knowing the devastating pain of heartbreak all too well, the reincarnated villainess hopes she can spare Felix from the agony of unrequited love. Overcome with sorrowful determination, Ophelia clasps her hands together in a silent apology to the prince she cherishes so deeply. Rising to her feet with renewed resolve, she vows to warmly embrace him and support him with the full might of her ducal house if his heart is ever broken. Suddenly, a striking silver-haired young man appears out of nowhere, casually expressing his surprise at crossing paths with someone in such an isolated location. Ophelia instantly recognizes the elusive capture target, recalling his tragic backstory and the fiercely possessive nature he hides beneath a dispassionate disposition. Desperately fighting back a frantic grin, she mentally praises his absolute masterpiece of a face, admitting he gives even her favorite Felix a run for his money. Regaining her aristocratic composure, Ophelia gracefully curtsies and introduces herself, apologizing for her deplorable manners while exploring the campus. The handsome stranger dismisses her concern and introduces himself simply as Liam Frisia. Watching Liam sit down and instantly lose himself in a book, Ophelia realizes he truly lives up to his reputation for completely disregarding any conversation. Standing near the flowerbeds in the quiet after-school hours, Ophelia's mind suddenly connects the dots. A chilling realization washes over her as she remembers this exact setting is meant for the heroine's very first encounter with Lord Liam. A loud thud interrupts her thoughts, causing Ophelia to flinch and peek nervously over the hedge. Bursting onto the scene with boundless energy, Alicia marvels loudly at the beautiful flowerbeds hidden away behind the school. Listening to the heavy clunk of a dropped watering can, Ophelia hides behind a nearby tree, knowing her presence would ruin the impending story event. Alicia picks up the watering can and jumps slightly as Liam notes how he keeps running into people today. Quickly turning around, the heroine correctly guesses the silver-haired upperclassman's identity. Beaming with a radiant smile, Alicia formally introduces herself as a first-year, boldly claiming that everyone at the academy knows exactly who he is. Eavesdropping from her hiding spot, Ophelia accurately predicts the flow of their dialogue as Liam casually asks if Alicia came to water the freesias. Alicia happily requests permission to care for the flowers, thrillingly accepting Liam's indifferent response that she doesn't actually need his approval. A tense silence stretches between the two as Liam impassively stares down at the kneeling heroine. Gesturing to the blooms, Alicia curiously asks if Liam likes the flowers since they share the same namesake, prompting him to flatly deny any particular interest in flora. Alicia attempts to brush off his cold rejection by cheerfully suggesting that most men simply aren't interested in flowers anyway. Sweating behind the tree, Ophelia winces at the incredibly tense atmosphere, noting Liam's complete and utter disinterest in the heroine's optimistic chatter. Observing the stifling silence, the reincarnated villainess realizes the video game never truly conveyed just how intimidating these handsome men could be in reality. Breaking the heavy quiet, Alicia warmly confesses that looking at the freesias makes her feel as though the goddess is right by her side. Suddenly, a glowing spark of magic pulses from the flower, catching the attention of both the bewildered heroine and the silent observer. Liam's eyes narrow as he questions who this mysterious girl truly is, swearing the flower just swayed despite the perfectly still air. Alicia cheerfully suggests chatting again sometime, mentioning she'll visit the freesias often. Liam doubts they'll have much to discuss, while Ophelia peeps from behind a tree to observe Alicia's characteristic heroine smile. A sudden, magical glow emanates from a blooming flower directly between Liam and Alicia. Ophelia watches in absolute shock and clenches her fists as a pristine flower magically blossoms before their eyes. Liam kneels in awe, admitting he has only ever read about such magnificent miracles in books. Alicia expresses equal amazement while Liam compliments the pristine white freesia that perfectly matches her beautiful hair. Ophelia watches in dismay, realizing the impassive Lord Liam is already opening his heart since white freesias represent his affection level. Startled by something unseen, Alicia abruptly excuses herself and hurries away, leaving Ophelia stunned by her fast maneuvering. Ophelia remembers that Liam takes the longest to open up in the game, making his sudden drastic change in attitude incredibly shocking. Stepping out from her hiding spot, Ophelia carefully surveys the suddenly empty flower beds. She mutters in disbelief that a white freesia blossomed much earlier than expected, noting Alicia's incredibly swift departure. Ophelia debates whether she should stop interfering and simply anticipate future developments instead. She mentally reviews the strict conditions, seasonal events, and sequence of events required for freesias to bloom in the original game. Deciding to head back to the dormitory first, Ophelia turns around and unexpectedly bumps straight into Lord Liam. Her heart nearly jumps out of her chest upon realizing the notoriously difficult capture target is still standing right behind her. Liam stares her down, coldly calling her out for being quite the shameless eavesdropper. Panicking internally, Ophelia stammers as she realizes he knew she was watching them the entire time. Bowing deeply, she earnestly apologizes for her indiscretion, desperately claiming she was simply curious. Liam narrows his eyes and sharply demands to know exactly what she was curious about. Frantically searching for an excuse, Ophelia knows she absolutely cannot admit she was monitoring their romantic progress. Forcing a polite smile, she claims she was merely curious about the specific color of the freesias blooming in the garden. Liam suspiciously notes her earlier intense stare, while Ophelia prays her whimsical excuse sounds believable enough. Pointing out the buds, Liam sharply states it should have taken at least a couple more days for them to fully bloom. He corners her verbally, stating she spoke as if she already knew the flowers were going to blossom so unnaturally soon. Ophelia sweats, knowing the freesias tucked behind the school building only flourish in tandem with the capture target's affection levels. She acknowledges the unnatural blooming speed, but reminds herself this is simply the magical world of a video game. Liam's piercing gaze locks onto her, silently demanding a logical explanation for her apparent foresight. Unable to confess her past life knowledge of the game, Ophelia remains completely silent under his heavy scrutiny. She grimly notes that no one would be happy to learn they are merely scripted characters existing in a video game. Flashing a bright, innocent smile, Ophelia feigns surprise and claims only the goddess of Frisia knows when a flower will bloom. Her heart pounds frantically as Liam stares her down in thick, intensely unnerving silence. Though terrified by the close call, she suspects the surprisingly sharp Lord Liam has simply lost interest in interrogating her. The scene shifts to the Grand Academy dormitory resting quietly under a starlit night sky. Entering the building with a heavy sigh, Ophelia declares she is dead beat now that the chaotic opening event is finally over. She reflects on the heroine's aggressive moves, certain that Alicia's game knowledge proves she is also a reincarnated person. Anticipating constant interruptions, Ophelia realizes it's only natural for the heroine to be incredibly wary of the designated villainess. Looking out the window, Ophelia knows she must seriously strategize her future as Alicia advances upon Prince Felix at breakneck speed. Refusing to lose heart, she passionately reaffirms her absolute right to obtain happiness regardless of her dark villainous role. The dormitory door creaks open, and a cheerful maid warmly welcomes Lady Ophelia back home. Handing over her bag to the maid, Ophelia dryly admits the entrance ceremony was predictably exhausting. Sighing heavily, Ophelia realizes she has been launched into a brutal, hard mode, far more difficult than she ever imagined. A warm teacup and fresh madeleines land softly on the table as a gentle voice praises her hard work. Surprised by the late-night treats, Ophelia listens as Karen kindly acknowledges her relentless effort to become a worthy consort to the crown prince. Beaming with genuine warmth, the devoted maid explains she only wanted to melt her mistress's stress away. Eager to pamper her lady, Karen enthusiastically suggests drawing a rose petal bath and giving her a soothing massage. Flustered by the overwhelming attention, Ophelia protests that it is too much trouble, but the fired-up maid absolutely refuses to take no for an answer. Smiling with pure devotion, Karen insists that nothing brings her greater happiness than seeing her dearest lady completely at ease. Deeply moved by the profound loyalty, Ophelia gazes at her maid with wide, grateful eyes. Thanking her from the bottom of her heart, the exhausted villainess finally surrenders and decides to let herself be completely pampered. Beneath the moonlight, a mysterious figure steps quietly past the blooming freesias with a serene smile. Standing before the eager class, the professor announces the start of their very first magic lesson and orders everyone to showcase their abilities. Staring ahead with a bead of sweat on her cheek, Ophelia mentally braces herself for the daunting trial of magic. Glancing nervously, she silently recalls that the heroine possesses incredibly rare light magic that eventually evolves into divine holy magic. As the teacher calls the students forward to let their magic flow, a chilling reminder echoes that the diametrically opposite element to light is dark magic. Striding forward with absolute confidence, Prince Felix effortlessly commands attention in his sleek magic class robes. Given the signal to begin, the crown prince casually raises his hand and summons a fierce, swirling blaze of fire. The classroom erupts into thunderous applause as the stunned professor praises his truly spectacular display of fire magic. Gazing at him with genuine admiration, Ophelia openly praises his mesmerizing ability to freely shape the flames. Flashing a brilliant smile of thanks, Felix steps back just as the professor calls Ophelia forward to demonstrate her water element using a simple glass cup. Trembling under the pressure, Ophelia conjures a pathetic splash of water, utterly mortified by her own dismal performance. The unimpressed professor quickly cuts the demonstration short, leaving Ophelia to awkwardly confess that her magical abilities are severely lacking. Leaning in close, Felix gently whispers that he actually likes her water magic, sending a furious blush across Ophelia's cheeks. Gripping her hands tightly together, the reincarnated villainess agonizingly reflects on the terrifying truth she must take to her grave. Hidden beneath her facade of weak water magic lies her true, terrifying attribute of dark magic. Because dark magic users are universally feared for their connection to the villainous butterflies of the moonless night, she knows she must absolutely conceal her taboo power. Vowing to bury her cursed abilities forever, she fiercely resolves to never use them in her desperate pursuit of a peaceful life. Suddenly, the classroom erupts into astonished gasps as Alicia unleashes a dazzling, unprecedented display of raw magical power. The thrilled professor immediately declares Alicia the kingdom's rising star of hope, praising her light magic as the ultimate weapon against the darkness. Flashing a breathtakingly radiant smile, the determined heroine loudly pledges to work hard for the sake of the entire kingdom. A wild clamor sweeps through the awestruck students as they openly revere the magnificent honor student as a literal goddess. Swarming around the radiant girl, her classmates proudly hail her as their country's ultimate beacon of hope. Refusing to be left behind, a fiercely fired-up Ophelia marches onto the magic training grounds to relentlessly drill her skills. Staring at a target on the wall, she vows to push her meager water magic to its absolute limits so she can properly assist Prince Felix. Just as she prepares to launch another spell, a sudden voice calls out her name and violently shakes her from her deep concentration. Spinning around, she finds Lord Alvin approaching with a slick smile, eagerly offering to lend a hand with her solo practice. Instantly recognizing the third son of a count, she mentally flags Alvin Cresswell as a shameless playboy and a dangerous capture target who excels in earth magic. Smoothly closing the distance, the amused playboy playfully teases that she desperately needs a private tutor to save her from distress. Though desperate to build good relationships with the main cast, Ophelia wildly internally panics over his overly familiar hand resting heavily on her shoulder. Flashing a dangerously charismatic grin, Alvin steps into her personal space and happily accepts the role of her makeshift tutor. Awkwardly stepping back, Ophelia nervously confesses her dismal magic skills and asks what the notorious playboy is actually doing on the training grounds today. Alvin cheerfully suggests going back to basics, grabbing a cup to test Ophelia's water summoning magic. To her absolute surprise, Alvin swiftly tugs Ophelia closer, playfully asking her to bear with him. Guiding her from behind, Alvin instructs the flustered Ophelia to focus all her magic into her hands to manifest water. Ophelia notes Alvin's practice teaching style, easily understanding why so many girls fall head over heels for his close proximity. As Alvin channels his magic into her hands, Ophelia feels a comforting warmth and realizes the process is going far smoother than usual. A sharp voice suddenly barks Ophelia's name, instantly shattering the peaceful atmosphere. Prince Felix abruptly strides onto the scene, his expression darkened by intense displeasure as he glares at the pair. Alvin frantically backpedals, desperately swearing to the crown prince that he isn't trying to hit on his fiancée. Felix coldly interrupts the panicked explanation, bluntly admitting that he is simply being petty. Relieved, Alvin happily steps aside, encouraging Felix to help Ophelia practice despite her worries about taking up his precious time. Flashing a warm smile, Felix seamlessly takes over the lesson while Ophelia fondly recalls how often he winked in the original game. Though she feels slightly guilty for ditching Alvin, Ophelia gladly embraces the chance to spend alone time with her beloved prince. Basking in his gentle guidance, she desperately wishes this tender moment could last forever. Walking back under the dark sky, Ophelia expresses genuine surprise at how late it has gotten. She earnestly thanks Felix for staying back to teach her, apologizing for losing track of time despite his incredibly busy schedule. Looking up at the moonless sky, Felix's expression suddenly turns serious as he shifts the conversation. He sternly warns Ophelia that they must be extremely careful of the butterflies of the moonless night tonight. Ophelia shudders as she recalls the game's lore, knowing these terrible creatures appear as fairies with ebony hair and charcoal eyes. According to the game, coming into contact with their shimmery mist will violently eat away at one's heart and completely twist their mind. While one or two aren't a threat, a congregating swarm becomes a horrifying menace capable of easily decimating an entire village. She remembers that vanquishing these monsters and saving the world is a glorious destiny reserved exclusively for the heroine and main characters. Ophelia mentally slaps herself for treating the situation lightly, recalling the sheer goosebumps she felt watching the heroine's spectacular final boss fight. Realizing the power of darkness peaks this year, she knows these terrifying butterflies will undoubtedly appear on cloudy, moonless nights exactly like tonight. Burdened by her past life knowledge, Ophelia realizes no one would ever take her seriously if she tried to warn them using obscure video game lore. Frustrated by her absolute ineptitude at magic, she resolves to develop strategies to strengthen national security while the blessed heroine fights. Ophelia furiously clenches her fists, hating that she can only contribute to the impending crisis in such a painfully roundabout way. Snapping out of her intense thoughts, Ophelia blinks in confusion as Felix suddenly apologizes for upsetting her with the dark conversation. She quickly reassures him that she is perfectly fine, agreeing that they must absolutely remain vigilant against the increasing enemy reports. Felix grimly reveals that the monsters are now plaguing not just villages, but the royal capital, the nobles' district, and potentially even the school grounds. Seeing Ophelia's stunned silence, Felix quickly apologizes again, swearing he never meant to frighten her. Flashing a reassuring smile, he proudly declares that they have bolstered defenses and deployed extra mercenary troops for everyone's absolute protection. Ophelia quietly absorbs the comforting information, her anxiety slowly melting away under his confident, protective gaze. Suddenly caught off guard by Felix's devastatingly handsome smile, Ophelia frantically commands herself to take deep breaths to calm her wildly racing heart. Her internal panic abruptly halts as she spots a sinister dark mist creeping silently out from the surrounding shadows. Felix immediately steps protectively in front of Ophelia, sharply ordering her not to leave his side under any circumstances. To their absolute horror, a menacing figure materializes from the dark mist, gleefully declaring that they have found fresh human prey. A flashback reveals a cheerful maid insisting that Lady Ophelia will surely appreciate receiving such beautiful flowers every single day. A young boy blushes softly, quietly agreeing with the maid's encouraging words as he firmly clutches the vibrant bouquet. The maid warmly welcomes the young Prince Felix as he steps into the room. Relieved to see him looking much better, the maids happily ask if he is finally recuperating from his terrible cold. Blushing deeply, Ophelia presents a handmade gift as thanks to Prince Felix, genuinely touched that he consistently brings her fresh freesias every single day. Sitting comfortably together on the sofa, the young couple happily bonds over their shared fondness for the sweet lemon jelly she prepared. Beaming with delight, Felix eagerly helps himself to the treat and warmly praises its absolutely delicious taste. Staring lovingly at his incredibly elegant fiancée, the young prince mentally marvels at the fact they will one day be married, completely ignoring her puzzled inquiry. Breaking the silence with a soft giggle, Ophelia boldly asks if he would mind too terribly if she watched him finish his dessert. Flustered by her unexpectedly direct affection, Felix stammers out that he would be in absolute heaven. Blushing furiously, the completely overwhelmed prince admits that her intense gaze is actually quite embarrassing. Internally panicking over his unmanly reaction, Felix furiously chastises himself for acting like a bashful maiden when he should be the one confidently looking after her. Clapping her hands together, Ophelia cheerfully suggests they move the conversation to her private room, prompting Felix to agree so he can restore his shattered honor. Surprised by the incredibly bold invitation, Felix double-checks her certainty, to which Ophelia firmly declares he is exceptionally special to her. Radiating pure joy at being called special, the young prince flashes a brilliant smile and eagerly accepts the invitation. Reaching out with a warm smile, Ophelia gently asks for his hand, leaving the completely stiff prince to clumsily accept the sweet gesture. Violently yanking her forward in a spur of nervous haste, Felix instantly regrets his mess-up as the two awkwardly apologize for their clumsy collision. Dropping their gaze in shared embarrassment, both Ophelia and Felix admit they were acting a little nervous around each other. Breaking the awkward tension, the adorable couple shares a genuine laugh as their hearts draw intimately closer. Guiding him down the hallway, Ophelia finally opens the door to unveil the private sanctuary of her personal room. Stepping inside, Felix immediately notices the familiar crimson freesias proudly displayed in a beautiful vase by the entrance. Smiling softly, Ophelia confesses that simply looking at the beautiful freesias he gave her puts her heart completely at ease. Catching the young prince entirely off guard, she warmly admits that the blooming flowers make it feel as though he is right by her side. Frantically apologizing for saying something so embarrassing out of the blue, Ophelia blushes wildly as Felix sincerely thanks her for decorating the room with his gifts. Turning his gaze away, the young boy softly contemplates a future where they are fully grown adults. Gazing out the window, he pictures them completely ancient and saddled with grandkids, quickly dismissing the passing thought. Driven by a fierce and undying devotion, Felix silently vows that he will absolutely never stop offering her beautiful flowers. Radiating quiet confidence, the young prince firmly believes his beloved fiancée will always cherish his endless affection. Noting the time on the clock, Felix gently extends his hand and suggests they finally head over to their next class. Staring closely at his face, Ophelia curiously points out his flushed cheeks, which the flustered prince quickly brushes off as nothing. Hiding his burning face, Felix internally confesses that he still gets incredibly flustered whenever Ophelia acts so adorably endearing. Walking side by side, the two incredibly smitten youths secretly marvel at each other's overwhelming charm and cuteness. Shattering the peaceful atmosphere, a sinister figure suddenly emerges from the shadows and gleefully declares the presence of human prey. Recognizing the terrifying entity, Ophelia realizes her taboo dark magic affinity truly allows her to decipher the eerie cries of the villainous butterflies of the moonless night. Swooping down with malicious intent, the dark entity ruthlessly orders the humans to meet their absolute doom. As a massive explosion violently erupts, Felix instantly throws his arm out to shield a terrified Ophelia from the devastating blast. Steeling his nerves, the brave prince firmly vows to protect her, anchoring Ophelia's trembling heart amidst the terrifying chaos. Summoning a massive torrent of fire, Felix fiercely commands his flames to engulf his foes, unleashing his devastating flame sword. Staring in absolute awe, Ophelia gasps at the sheer, overwhelming magnitude of her fiancé's incredible magical prowess. Having utterly vanquished the terrifying threat with a single devastating blow, the pair stands safely amidst the dissipating smoke. Turning back to his beloved, Felix gently asks if she was scared while assuring her the deadly danger has officially passed. Blushing deeply, Ophelia tenderly grasps his hand and expresses her profound gratitude, admitting she was absolutely certain he would keep her safe. Giving her hand a reassuring squeeze, Felix softly requests that she continue to stay right by his side. Blushing furiously behind his hand, the devoted prince proudly promises to keep protecting her, sealing Ophelia's joyful agreement to stay together. Ophelia reflects that running into the terrifying butterflies was actually a blessing in disguise, realizing that having someone jump in to protect her makes her heart wildly flutter. A cheerful Alicia beams brightly, wishing everyone a sweet good morning. Ophelia excitedly asks Felix if they can study together during their free time, hoping he can teach her some confusing parts of their assignment. Watching from afar, Ophelia spots Alicia casually approaching Lord Klaus to suggest they head to the library together. Alicia enthusiastically praises Lord Alvin, openly admiring how he easily bested everyone at sports. Ophelia watches the heroine with growing suspicion, wondering if Lady Alicia has been acting especially aggressive lately or if it is just her imagination. She realizes the heroine is meticulously tracking the capture target's every move, simply waiting for the perfect moment to sink her claws into them. Snapping out of her intense thoughts, Ophelia blinks in surprise as Felix gently reminds her that it is time for their next class. Flustered, Ophelia desperately apologizes for spacing out and keeping him waiting, frantically grabbing her textbook as she asks if music class is next. Felix flashes a warm, dazzling smile, softly reassuring her that they still have plenty of time and there is absolutely no need to rush. Ophelia melts entirely under his loving gaze, noting that his patience and constant escorts are wonderful little details completely hidden in the original game. Her heart skips a beat as she suddenly spots the famously difficult Lord Liam resting quietly under a tree. Recognizing the girl beside him even from behind, Ophelia wonders if the ambitious heroine has decided to pursue Liam instead. She genuinely hopes that is the case, completely unaware that Liam is silently watching her from the shadows. Their eyes suddenly lock in a sharp, startling gaze across the courtyard. Panicking, Ophelia desperately convinces herself it was just her imagination, knowing the utterly indifferent Lord Liam possesses absolutely no interest in her. She rapidly whirls around to escape his piercing stare, screaming internally as she wonders why he was looking directly at her. As Ophelia nervously points out the pair to Felix, Liam utters a soft hum of curiosity at her sudden departure. Noting that the two seem acquainted, Felix suggests they call out to the heroine so she doesn't end up late for class. Felix calls out Lady Alicia's name, causing the heroine to violently flinch and exclaim that she completely lost track of time. Ophelia gloomily curses her own curiosity, knowing she would have gladly ignored the heroine if Felix's upright character hadn't compelled him to intervene. Alicia happily thanks them for retrieving her, subtly pouting as Felix dismisses the praise by claiming they were just passing by. Turning his attention to the quiet priest, Felix politely reminds Lord Liam that the break is ending and he should head back to class as well. Liam releases a heavy sigh and agrees, officially taking his leave as he bids them farewell. Relieved they caught her in time, Felix urges the girls to hurry so they don't inconvenience the instructor for their upcoming music class. Ophelia's blood suddenly runs cold as she remembers this specific class features a rigorous test on their singing abilities. Alicia flashes a falsely innocent smile, complaining to Lady Ophelia about how nerve-wracking it is to sing in front of the entire class. Catching the highly calculated, knowing look on the heroine's face, Ophelia forces a tight smile and tightly agrees. Painfully aware of her own terrible singing skills, Ophelia bitterly notes that peaceful days remain a distant dream whenever the heroine is around. Walking through the towering grand halls, Ophelia seriously wonders if Lady Alicia is already convinced they are mortal enemies destined to clash. Her thoughts suddenly drift back to the courtyard, recalling the incredibly intense look Lord Liam gave her under the trees. A startling realization washes over her as she understands Liam wasn't just glancing at her, but actively watching over her the entire time. Clutching her textbook tightly against her chest, the villainess wonders exactly why the notoriously cold capture target would pay her any mind. She recalls the lore regarding the Academy's annual New Year's party, where a sacred hymn is publicly dedicated to the goddess of Phrygia. The highly coveted roles for this performance are strictly reserved for the heroine and whichever capture target she has successfully romanced. The entire event is practically a massive showcase of their blooming relationship, designed to secure absolute approval and admiration from all their peers. Back in the classroom, Felix and Alicia deliver stunning vocal performances, their beautiful melodies easily filling the silent room. The entire class immediately erupts into thunderous applause, absolutely captivated by the flawless singing. As the instructor concludes the test, Ophelia laments that Alicia will inevitably be chosen as the representative, wishing desperately that she could even carry a tune. Pushing aside her insecurities, Ophelia sincerely praises Prince Felix for his lovely performance, internally squealing over how incredibly cute he looks when flustered. Excited by the prospect of singing at the upcoming New Year's party, Alicia eagerly gushes over Prince Felix's splendid vocal talents. Admitting her overwhelming nervousness, the starry-eyed heroine notes that attending as a student representative would be a massive honor. Suddenly shifting the conversation, a cat-eared student directly asks Lady Ophelia if she is secretly aiming for the coveted singing position. The girl cheerfully reasons that a young lady from a prestigious ducal family must surely possess a phenomenal singing voice. Irritated by the sheer audacity, Ophelia desperately tries to maintain a cordial facade while internally screaming that Alicia already knows she is a terrible singer. Shattering the tense atmosphere, Prince Felix confidently steps in and declares that he genuinely likes Ophelia's singing voice. Caught completely off guard by the rescue, Ophelia blushes and graciously thanks him, assuming he only intervened to save her from a humiliating tight spot. Moved by his incredibly sweet defense, the villainess resolves to genuinely improve her singing just to live up to his kind words. Flustered by her humble reaction, Felix warmly insists he could easily listen to her sing forever. Staring intensely from the sidelines, a deeply focused Alicia casts a sharp, unreadable side glance at the happy couple. A few days later, a public notice officially announces Felix and Alicia as the chosen student representatives for the grand party. Lost in the relentless flow of time, an entire month completely flies by before Ophelia even realizes it. Observing the school grounds, Ophelia notes that an incredibly aggressive Alicia is relentlessly rotating between the main capture targets. Watching the heroine chat up yet another boy, onlookers openly whisper about her relentless and seemingly shameless pursuit of high-ranking men. The gossiping nobles cruelly attribute Alicia's utterly shameless behavior directly to her lowly commoner upbringing. Peering at the magical flower beds, a stunned Ophelia realizes that all 4 colored freesias are now in full bloom. Connecting the dots, she realizes the heroine's affections are automatically rising as she successfully defeats the dark butterflies off-screen. Gripping the windowsill with trembling hands, Ophelia admits she is terrified of the rapidly advancing game plot. Glaring fiercely into the sky, she steels her absolute resolve to survive whatever terrifying fate comes her way. Tossing and turning in bed, Ophelia spends a restless night completely plagued by her heavy anxieties. Pushing the door open, a cheerful Karen enters the room to deliver a fresh, warm breakfast to her mistress. Yawning heavily over her morning meal, Ophelia silently laments how much the game's stressful progression utterly ruined her sleep. Noting her mistress's gloomy demeanor, Karen gently asks what is heavily troubling the exhausted young lady. Encouraging her devoted maid to speak freely, Ophelia listens as Karen voices her deep concern over her recent low spirits. Pumping her fists with pure loyalty, Karen fiercely promises to always lend a listening ear whenever Ophelia needs to confide in someone. Touched by the warm support, Ophelia claims it is merely school stress, prompting Karen to suggest a relaxing visit to the library. Pouring a fresh cup of tea, the maid warmly hypes up the library's vast collection as the perfect healing remedy for a book lover. Instantly perking up, Ophelia enthusiastically agrees to the brilliant idea as a deeply relieved Karen smiles softly. Following the secluded path behind the school building, Ophelia finally arrives at a beautiful courtyard fountain. Towering magnificently before her, the massive academy library stands proudly as an absolute sanctuary of knowledge. Stepping through the grand doors, Ophelia gasps in pure awe at the stunning, sprawling architecture hidden within. Reveling in the peaceful quiet, she happily agrees with Karen that this secluded haven is the absolute perfect place for a proper break. Pulling a fascinating novel off the shelf, Ophelia reads about 2 childhood friends falling in love while fighting local incidents hand in hand. Completely engrossed in the romantic tale, she aimlessly wanders deep into the towering bookshelves to find a cozy place to sit. Peeking around a quiet corner, she hopes to find a less crowded area where she can read in absolute peace. Suddenly, her eyes lock onto a highly familiar pair of glasses glinting sharply in the dim light. Freezing in absolute shock, Ophelia stares wide-eyed as a terrifying realization violently crashes over her. Panicking internally, she realizes she completely forgot this exact spot is Lord Klaus's favorite reading area, and the heroine is standing right beside him. Desperately trying to sneak away, Ophelia freezes in her tracks as Klaus spots her and smoothly calls out her name. Forcing a strained smile, the trapped villainess nervously greets him, desperately praying she can make quick small talk and immediately excuse herself. Ophelia spots a rare book she has been dying to read, but her excitement falters when she notices Lord Klaus already sitting at the desk with it. Klaus catches her intense, fidgeting stare and easily deduces that she wants the very book resting in front of him. Startled by her own obviousness, Ophelia frantically apologizes for losing her composure, only for Klaus to graciously offer her the book since he just finished it. Ophelia happily explains her deep interest in water safety for her territory, prompting Klaus to ask why she wants to read such a dry, technical manual so badly. Flustered, Ophelia desperately denies biting off more than she can chew, while Klaus watches her with a calm, analytical smile. A shot reveals a drowsy Ophelia, clearly exhausted from pushing herself too hard to study. Klaus watches the girl doze off, noting her incredible resilience as she repeatedly returns to study despite his initial attempts to rebuff her. Completely absorbed in the rare text, Ophelia flips through the pages, fascinated by the incredible impact of water quality on delicate flowers. Klaus releases a heavy sigh, murmuring that the ridiculous stories he had been hearing lately were ultimately just unfounded rumors. Startled out of her reading trance, Ophelia frantically apologizes once again for completely forgetting herself and missing his words. To her absolute shock, Klaus admits he finds her genuinely interesting to talk to and casually suggests she read her book right there with him. Knowing the game scripted him to ruthlessly shoo her away, Ophelia politely declines the unexpected invitation and quickly excuses herself to meet her maid. The heavy doors shut behind her, leaving Ophelia to deeply wonder what Klaus had mumbled while she was so entirely engrossed in her reading. Stepping out into the evening air, she decides to push those confusing thoughts aside and check on something important before heading back to the dormitory. Her expression suddenly hardens with sharp realization as she spots something incredibly unusual resting in the dirt. Ophelia stares down in sheer confusion at a flourishing bed of blooming white freesias. Absolute panic sets in as she wonders if Alicia is actively pursuing the reverse harem route, a grand privilege reserved exclusively for the shrine maiden of Frisia. The horrifying thought hits her that if the reverse harem route is indeed active, a truly terrible fate awaits the villainess. In a flashback, the gamer excitedly celebrates finally unlocking the notoriously difficult reverse harem ending without relying on any walkthroughs. The gamer suddenly freezes in sheer shock, staring blankly at her screen as she realizes the incredibly dark conclusion tied to this specific route. The horrifying truth hangs heavily in the air as she realizes Ophelia is actually executed in this ending. The game's lore reveals that after having her fiancé stolen, Ophelia violently snaps and summons the butterflies of the moonless night to attack the country. Back in the present, Ophelia fiercely squeezes her bag, aggressively vowing she has absolutely no intention of controlling those monsters for her own ends. Trembling, she realizes that if her earlier encounter with the butterflies wasn't an accident, the game itself might be actively swaying reality to force her ultimate doom. She grimly suspects that Alicia already knows this timeline, terrified the heroine won't be satisfied with just taking Felix, but might actively want her life as well. Staring intently at the blooming freesias, a sudden, unnervingly familiar sensation washes over her. Dark energy pulses fiercely around her as she feels the exact same agonizing despair that once drove the original Ophelia to complete madness. Fighting back the encroaching darkness, she violently rejects the narrative, fiercely swearing she would never do anything to hurt Prince Felix. Alicia suddenly bursts onto the scene, urgently warning of a dangerous butterfly of the moonless night rapidly approaching from nearby. Panting heavily, Alicia points directly into the dark shadows and confidently declares that she has found the target. Ophelia's heart pounds in absolute terror as Alicia charges ahead, completely oblivious to the monster's incredibly stealthy approach. Felix and Alicia stand together, grimly noting that these terrifying creatures are appearing much more frequently across the grounds now. Alicia confidently tells Felix to leave the fight entirely to her, while Ophelia realizes this must be a programmed event to dramatically raise the prince's affection. Thrusting her hands forward, Alicia summons a blinding holy light to completely eradicate the dark creature. The radiant magic blasts forward, instantly incinerating the monstrous butterfly right where it hovers. The dark creature crumbles to ash under the brilliant light, and Alicia cheerfully announces that everyone is finally safe. Felix earnestly thanks the heroine for her vital assistance, highly praising her combat abilities in a school where most students simply cannot fight. Klaus suddenly bursts through the doors with a loud bang, urgently asking Prince Felix if everyone is all right. Klaus admits he rushed over because he heard Lady Alicia say something was off, asking if the others felt the impending danger too. Alicia cheerfully claims she easily handled the lone butterfly, explaining she conveniently ran into Prince Felix on the way and had him accompany her. Awestruck by Alicia's incredible combat skills, Klaus suggests she could secure any job she desires while advising against rushing headfirst into danger. Wiping off the grime of battle, Alicia casually dismisses any interest in fighting, prompting Klaus to suggest she become a civil servant or a member of the shrine. Eavesdropping from behind a tree, Ophelia assumes the heroine will choose a respectable career path, only to be completely taken aback when Alicia confesses she harbors a vastly different dream. Trembling with anticipation, the hidden villainess eagerly awaits the commoner's true aspirations, knowing her choice will ripple across the kingdom. Radiating pure, unapologetic ambition, Alicia boldly declares her ultimate goal is to become the happiest bride in the entire world. Peeking around the trunk, Ophelia grimly notes the surrounding high-ranking men and realizes the heroine fully intends to marry into royalty or the upper nobility. Reflecting on the heavy crown of leadership, Ophelia silently argues that a true royal bride must possess flawless elegance, a rigorous education, and an unwavering love for her country. A striking childhood memory surfaces, reminding Ophelia of her solemn instruction to not only love her future husband, Prince Felix, but to wholly devote herself to the people she will serve. Gazing at the peaceful townspeople, the reincarnated villainess realizes she fiercely cherishes this world as reality, questioning if the ambitious heroine shares that same selfless devotion. Staring intensely at Alicia, Ophelia severely doubts the commoner possesses the fortitude and grace necessary to shoulder the crushing weight of the royal family. Without warning, a violent shockwave rips through Ophelia's mind, shattering her current reality as long-lost memories of her past life brutally force their way to the surface. Flashing back to the modern streets of Japan, a frustrated gamer waits at a red light, eager to rush home and play her favorite video game before a sudden chime interrupts her. Checking her glowing phone, the young woman stops dead in her tracks as she reads a shocking, direct message from the Frisia development team. The official message thanks fans for their constant support and addresses the overwhelming flood of requests begging for a way to save the doomed villainess. Reeling from the monumental news, the gamer reads that the developers have officially decided to release hidden files in the game's latest update. Completely electrified by the announcement, the excited fan bumps into a passerby as she frantically reads about the existence of the secret hidden files. The developers' notes reveal a secret route where attaining a certain affection level turns the Frisias black, unlocking a hidden sequence with the gardener's boy. Unveiling the ultimate plot twist, the update text declares that players will finally be able to play directly as Ophelia and romance the other capture targets. Her heart pounding wildly, the gamer pieces together the unbelievable truth that Ophelia is destined to become the true protagonist of this newly unlocked route. Overjoyed that her desperate pleas were heard, the die-hard fan fiercely resolves to play the update and save her beloved villainess from a tragic fate. Blinded by absolute excitement, the distracted girl sprints eagerly across the street, completely unaware of her real-world surroundings. Snapping violently back to the present, Ophelia collapses onto the academy grounds, clutching her chest as the crushing weight of her past life's tragic end sets in. Hot tears spill uncontrollably down her trembling face as the devastating realization of her true, terrifying circumstances washes over her. Burying her face in her hands, the heartbroken girl openly weeps, whispering Prince Felix's name as the sheer despair of her situation threatens to consume her. A sweet memory of Felix warmly inviting her to lunch flashes through her mind, anchoring her broken spirit with the promise of his gentle smile. Jolted by sudden news in the hallway, Ophelia shoots a sharp glance as she overhears that Alicia has cornered a teacher. Exploiting a meeting regarding the student representatives, a giddy Alicia eagerly latches onto Prince Felix, thrilled to finally spend quality time alone with him. Forcing a painfully hollow smile, Ophelia masks her crushing disappointment and politely dismisses the messenger, pretending the cancelled lunch doesn't bother her. Rationalizing the painful rejection, she softly reminds herself that the crown prince is an incredibly busy man and these sudden changes simply cannot be helped. Sitting entirely alone on a secluded courtyard bench, a deeply melancholic Ophelia picks at her food, silently lamenting that solitude completely ruins the taste of a good meal. Refusing to surrender to despair, she fiercely vows to maintain her engagement, drawing strength from the genuine support she has received and her desire to forge a peaceful path. Despite her absolute resolve, a lingering shadow of doubt plagues her mind as she wonders how this unpredictable, chaotic story will actually conclude. Safely back in her private quarters, Ophelia silently fumes over Alicia's sheer, unbridled audacity in constantly stealing her fiancé's attention. Closing her untouched lunchbox, a thoroughly defeated Ophelia apologizes to Karen, confessing that the overwhelming anxiety has completely killed her appetite. Staring at the blooming freesias, the villainess realizes with absolute horror that Alicia is deliberately pursuing the dreaded reverse harem ending, a route that guarantees Ophelia's death. A dark, cynical expression crosses her face as she bitterly questions who would ever care about the tragic demise of a mere villainous noble lady. Flashing back to the classroom, an apologetic Felix gently expresses his regret over missing their lunch, prompting Ophelia to gracefully assure him she completely understands his duties. Catching her entirely off guard, the radiant prince immediately asks her out on a proper date, sending a massive jolt of relieved joy straight through her heart. Just as Felix smoothly asks where she wants to go, a piercingly cheerful voice violently shatters their intimate moment. Bursting onto the scene with zero hesitation, Alicia gleefully thanks Felix for sharing lunch with her, loudly declaring that food tastes 1,000,000 times better in his company. The other noble girls express surprise at seeing Alicia dining in the cafeteria, noting she usually has lunch with Lady Ophelia. Alicia cheerfully boasts that Prince Felix decided to have lunch with her out of the sheer goodness of his heart. Watching from the shadows, Ophelia fiercely grips her belongings as she realizes the heroine is intimately acquainting herself with the prince. Alicia boldly presents Prince Felix with his favorite lemon jelly, declaring she grabbed them dessert since they ran out of time. A loud crash suddenly shatters the peaceful atmosphere as Alicia takes a violent tumble to the floor. Crying on the ground, Alicia maliciously accuses Lady Ophelia of deliberately tripping her. Ophelia stares in absolute bewilderment, completely baffled by the baseless accusation since they merely had lunch together. A wave of shocked clamor ripples through the gathered students as they eagerly watch the unfolding drama. While Alicia fiercely demands she stop playing innocent, Ophelia smoothly smiles and suggests the heroine simply tripped over a desk leg. An instructor suddenly interrupts the tense confrontation, demanding to know what happened and announcing that class is starting. Everyone is ordered to quickly return to their seats while the custodians are called to clean up the mess. Prince Felix gently hands Ophelia a handkerchief and asks if she is all right, leaving her internally infuriated despite escaping unscathed. Ophelia admires Felix's kindness but notes that the heroine is foolishly making enemies instead of forming crucial political connections for her reverse harem route. Staring at her reflection, Ophelia frustratedly wonders why Alicia completely ignores the reality of their situation by blindly following the game's script. She recalls the game's villainous route, where the player takes over Ophelia's life, wondering if activating it will finally secure her a happy ending. Standing tall with absolute resolve, she fiercely declares that even villainesses possess the right to obtain happiness. Strolling through the vibrant gardens, Ophelia reflects on her tireless efforts to pave a bright future with Prince Felix ever since her reincarnation. She remembers that the villainous route is triggered by befriending the gardener, who was originally depicted as an old man in the game's illustrations. To her surprise, she spots a young boy working on a ladder and wonders if he replaces the old man from the game. Ophelia kindly calls out a greeting, causing the startled boy to halt his work immediately. She officially introduces herself as Ophelia Laralake, explaining she wants to speak to the gardener regarding the freesias. The boy introduces himself as Io, the gardener's apprentice, while Ophelia flushes in hardcore gamer excitement at meeting a brand new character. Io explains his grandfather planted the freesias but hurt his back, noting with curiosity that someone else has been secretly watering them. Ophelia warmly praises him for taking over such heavy responsibilities, leaving the young apprentice utterly flustered by the compliment. Showing off a deep red rose he grew, Io proudly admits that tending to the beautiful flowers is part of his daily routine. Io blushes deeply, confessing that Ophelia is the very first noble to ever patiently listen to his ramblings. Ophelia's expression softens with genuine sympathy as she notes how incredibly lonely he must feel working entirely without his grandfather. Io quietly agrees with her assessment, prompting Ophelia to pull out her bag and ask if he is hungry. Flashing a bright smile, she invites him to a little tea party so she can hear all about his fascinating flowers. Io's eyes sparkle with absolute delight as he eagerly accepts her sweet invitation. The pair enjoys a delightful spread of snacks and chamomile tea from Ophelia's territory, which Io finds absolutely delicious. Though she feels slightly guilty for strategically using sweets to befriend him just like the game dictates, Ophelia steals her resolve for the sake of her happy future. Ophelia gently asks what color freesias will grow in the flower bed, hoping she doesn't come off as too passive-aggressive. Leaning in closely, Io reveals that the freesias planted in that specific area are incredibly special. He explains that the sacred seeds can miraculously change colors depending on how they are grown, sometimes shifting hues completely out of the blue. Sipping her tea, Ophelia calmly admits she was hoping to see black freesias blossom. Io thoughtfully remarks that black flowers sound like something from a fairy tale, while Ophelia notes that black roses are a rare sight in aristocratic mansions. Thrilled by her interest, Io eagerly offers to show her other flower varieties, which Ophelia cheerfully accepts. Walking past the lively training hall, They listen to the loud cheers echoing from the practicing students. Io explains they must cultivate black roses in a secluded area because their dark associations make them wildly unpopular with the noble ladies. Admiring the beautiful freesias, Ophelia happily accepts the gardener boy's generous offer to take some blooms back to decorate her room. Touched by her genuine appreciation, the boy proudly reveals that he is the one who actually grew the beautiful flowers that nobody ever uses. Thrilled by the sweet gesture, Ophelia cheerfully accepts the offer while the boy enthusiastically readies the freshly cut blooms for her. Suddenly, a chorus of screaming fans violently interrupts the piece, prompting Ophelia to immediately recognize the chaotic commotion echoing across the campus. Desperate to avoid the noisy crowd, she silently pleads to escape far away from the rapidly approaching mob of swooning girls. Through the dense foliage, a sharply focused Lord Alvin flawlessly executes his intense sword practice with absolute precision. With swift and powerful strikes, Alvin seamlessly demonstrates his incredible combat prowess, slicing through the air with unmatched speed. Staring in absolute awe, a stunned Ophelia marvels at his magnificent and incredibly precise swordsmanship. Watching the intense practice match conclude, Ophelia recalls that Alvin hails from a prestigious family of knights, perfectly explaining his breathtaking skills. The gardener boy, Io, finally returns with the gathered flowers, apologizing for the wait just as Alvin formally concludes his training. A wave of gasps ripples through the crowd as the girls spot Ophelia's black roses, immediately assuming someone has tragically passed away. Flashing a bright smile, Ophelia quickly dispels the morbid rumors by explaining she merely got them to decorate her dorm room. Brushing off the ominous symbolism of the dark blooms, she casually dismisses the onlookers' concerns and praises the striking black color. Approaching the group with a dazzling smile, Lord Alvin smoothly declares that women are exceptionally beautiful regardless of the color they wear. Taking her hand in a surprisingly bold move, Alvin charmingly insists the dark roses perfectly highlight Ophelia's radiant beauty. Ignoring the wildly jealous squeals of his devoted fan club, Ophelia coldly stares down the notorious playboy as he blatantly flirts with her. A strict teacher furiously storms onto the scene, demanding the disruptive crowd immediately vacate the training grounds. Alvin flinches slightly under the teacher's menacing glare, instantly recognizing the immense danger of the situation. Sighing heavily, Ophelia realizes Alvin has returned to the training grounds while a frantic Io apologizes for trailing behind her. Noting Alvin's frequent presence in the garden, Io correctly guesses the handsome knight's identity, leaving Ophelia completely surprised by his observation. Reflecting on his incredibly smooth follow-up, Ophelia wonders if she might actually get along with the notoriously difficult capture target. Slipping into a secluded area, a groaning Alvin inspects his fiercely burning foot, bitterly cursing his stubborn habit of constantly putting on a strong front. Startled by a sudden noise, the injured knight jerks his head up to find a perfectly composed Ophelia standing quietly in the doorway. Stepping forward, she genuinely thanks him for effortlessly backing her up during the incredibly awkward encounter with the black roses. Surprised by her unwavering sincerity, Alvin brushes off the praise by claiming he only spoke the absolute truth about her striking beauty. Ignoring his playboy facade, Ophelia firmly reveals a first aid kit and declares her absolute intention to treat his injured left foot. Completely stunned that she effortlessly saw through his disguise, Alvin stares in shock as the elegant lady lectures him about ignoring injuries. Kneeling gracefully, Ophelia carefully applies ointment to his foot, leaving Alvin to silently marvel at her incredibly gentle fingers. Wrapping the bandage, Ophelia explains she couldn't use healing magic but gently advises him to have a professional examine it later. Utterly bewildered by her sharp intuition, Alvin demands to know exactly how she figured out he was secretly injured. Flustered by his intense gaze, Ophelia quickly packs up her kit and excuses herself, accidentally blurting out a stray thought in her haste. Freezing in absolute shock, she frantically attempts to cover up her slip as Alvin curiously questions what she meant by taking it the wrong way. Recovering her poise, she flashes a brilliant smile and warmly reassures him she never believed the terrible rumors about his playboy habits anyway. Leaving the stunned knight completely speechless, Ophelia gracefully exits the room, shutting the heavy door firmly behind her. Marveling at his newly treated foot, Alvin realizes the intense pain has completely vanished, prompting him to finally head back to the dorms. The next morning, Prince Felix formally greets a flustered Ophelia at the gates, causing the surrounding maids to swoon over the stunning couple. Denying that he had been waiting long, Felix flashes a warm smile while Ophelia internally laments how intensely they stand out in public. Escorting her to the academy, Felix cheerfully explains he was forced to wait at the gate since boys are strictly banned from entering the girls' dormitory. Despite her initial annoyance, Ophelia secretly rejoices that her beloved fiancé deliberately made time to walk with her as he asks about the dark butterflies. Reassuring the deeply worried prince, she firmly states she hasn't encountered any more of the terrifying creatures since that fateful night. Looking at her fiancé, Ophelia realizes that Prince Felix looks incredibly tired, knowing exactly why. She uses her past life knowledge to deduce that he has been busy killing butterflies at night alongside Alicia. When Felix thanks her, Ophelia earnestly asks him to be careful since she doesn't know what might happen. Felix checks on her, prompting Ophelia to explain she woke up in the middle of the night and secretly took a walk. Felix remarks on the beautiful moonlight, comparing the garden to a painting and wishing he could have seen it with her. Flustered, Ophelia happily accepts the sentiment but quickly clarifies she wasn't actually walking in the middle of the night. She asks if the danger is the butterflies, but Felix notes the bright moonlight and asks if she doesn't want him to see it. When she frantically apologizes for being brazen, Felix gently assures her he isn't mad. Felix firmly promises to protect her, insisting that the real danger isn't the butterflies at all. Leaning in closely, the prince boldly declares that it is entirely up to him to decide who he protects. Ophelia stands completely frozen in the starry night, absolutely stunned by Prince Felix's charming words. Her mind reels in absolute shock as she struggles to comprehend the sheer depth of affection directed her way. The next morning, Felix playfully teases her about wanting a night walk, leaving Ophelia furiously blushing. A cheerful Alicia intercepts them in the hallway, loudly asking what happened yesterday between the engaged couple. When Alicia mentions the color black, Ophelia internally panics, wondering if she means the roses or if someone died. Alicia slyly notes that Ophelia and Alvin were alone at the training ground, clearly trying to provoke Felix. Ophelia scrambles to formulate an explanation, recalling that she was only alone with Alvin because everyone else left. She remembers confronting Alvin specifically to address the hidden injury he had sustained. Felix gently urges Ophelia not to make such a distressed face, promising to listen to whatever she has to say. Ophelia smoothly explains that she was simply thanking Lord Alvin for complimenting the roses she held. She enthusiastically details the stunning black roses she received from Io, mentioning they grow right next to the training ground. Felix warmly agrees to visit the flowerbed during their walk tomorrow, noting he has work to finish today. Ophelia sighs in massive relief, incredibly glad that Felix doesn't seem to misunderstand the situation at all. After school the next day, Felix taps playfully on Ophelia's desk and asks if she is ready to leave. Felix flashes a handsome smile and remarks that it has been a while since they went on a date, sending Ophelia into a blushing frenzy. Bashfully telling him not to phrase it like that, she leads the prince straight to the black roses flower bed. Felix surveys the secluded area, confirming it truly is located right next to the bustling training ground. Ophelia proudly introduces Prince Felix to the young apprentice gardener tending the dark blooms. Io humbly greets them both, eagerly inviting them to look at the flowers he just finished working on. Felix praises the boy's hard work, recognizing these as the exact roses his fiancée had mentioned earlier. Ophelia admires the lovely blooms, lamenting that it is a shame people avoid them simply because of their color. Felix agrees they are beautiful flowers, though he admits the dark image is rather difficult to shake off. A secret smile crosses Ophelia's face as she rejoices, knowing black is the true signature color of a villainess. Felix casually drops a massive bombshell, telling Ophelia he loves her and that the black roses suit her perfectly. Ophelia's heart races wildly, feeling incredibly self-conscious after hearing such a direct and sudden confession. As Felix murmurs he should have gifted her black roses, Ophelia melts into the sweet atmosphere while internally dreading the impending butterfly attacks. She mentally grumbles about the terrible timing, wishing she could simply enjoy the rare quiet moment to herself. Ophelia reflects on how overworked Felix has been, perfectly balancing his royal duties, studies, and secret nighttime missions. Noticing her restlessness, Felix thoughtfully invites her to share some delicious herbal tea next time to ease her worries. Ophelia beams with a beautifully radiant smile, genuinely thrilled by his sweet and comforting invitation. Hoping her delicious herbal tea eases his anxieties, Ophelia warmly smiles as Prince Felix happily praises her brewing skills. Gazing deeply into her eyes, the devoted prince declares that he only wants Ophelia right by his side. Catching her completely off guard, Felix suddenly pulls his fiancée close, leaving a hidden Io totally stunned by their intimate moment. Blushing wildly, Ophelia listens as the charming prince praises her stunning determination and endearing honesty. Panicking over his rapidly escalating affection, the reincarnated villainess realizes she is already dangerously deep into her dreaded route. Clutching her wildly beating heart, Ophelia internally screams over how Felix's favorability is vastly outpacing the heroine's. Breaking the romantic tension, Felix suddenly spots Io working in the flower beds and points out the replanting process. Flashing a brilliant smile, the eager prince casually invites Ophelia to go check on the gardener's progress together. Startled by their sudden approach, Io pauses his digging to politely ask the royal couple how he can help. Apologizing for the interruption, Ophelia expresses her deep interest in the replanting process, prompting an eager Io to invite her to join in. While a panicked Io immediately apologizes for casually inviting nobles to do manual labor, Felix completely agrees that it would be a wonderful experience. Scrambling to find clean gloves, the flustered gardener happily agrees to teach the enthusiastic royal couple how to plant flowers. Stepping up to the flower bed, Felix smoothly offers Ophelia his spare gloves as they prepare to handle the bulbs. Awakening to bright sunlight streaming through her window, a drowsy Ophelia groggily wonders if she has the day off from the academy. Snuggling deep into her warm blankets, she happily recalls the blissful tea party they shared after their wonderful gardening date. A sudden knock shatters her peaceful morning as a maid announces an unexpected tea party invitation from Prince Felix. Rubbing the sleep from her eyes, Ophelia listens as her confused maids note that the busy prince usually informs her of such plans directly. Accepting the sealed envelope, Ophelia grimly realizes that Felix always tells her his schedule well in advance. Shaking off her grogginess, the young lady agrees with her maid to quickly start preparing for the day's abrupt events. Staring intensely at the familiar envelope, Ophelia realizes with absolute dread that she has seen this exact letter in her past life. A chilling realization washes over the doomed villainess as she identifies the letter as the ultimate trigger for the dreaded conviction event. Steeling her nerves, a fully dressed Ophelia marches outside to face the terrifying reality of her rapidly approaching doom. Stopping abruptly, her eyes lock onto the academy's massive flower beds blooming wildly in the sunlight. Staring in sheer horror at the multicolored blossoms, Ophelia calculates that every single capture target has already hit maximum affection in a mere 3 months. Cursing her own blindness, the terrified villainess realizes she completely failed to notice the massive gap since Felix last sent her a letter. Masking her pale face from her deeply worried maid, Ophelia rejects the offer to rest and braces herself for the nightmare ahead. Running her thumb over the wax seal, she confirms that the ominous invitation truly came directly from her fiancé. Gripping the letter tightly, she mentally screams that the game's ultimate ending is completely breaking the timeline by happening years too early. Glaring at the blooming freesias, Ophelia accepts that this unpredictable reality is moving vastly faster than the original video game ever did. Racking her brain, she frantically wonders if the heroine monopolized Felix's time while the two fiancés kept missing each other. A dark shadow falls over her face as she agonizes over whether his affection for the commoner spiked during those missed moments. Clinging to hope, Ophelia desperately recalls Felix's warm smiles and how he constantly asked her to stay by his side. Fighting back her rising despair, the determined lady refuses to surrender to the terrifying game logic. Anchoring her heart to Felix's genuine kindness, she firmly rejects the idea that he would abruptly annul their engagement without warning. Staring intensely into the distance, Ophelia realizes her ultimate judgment will commence in a matter of hours. Noticing her severe distress, a deeply concerned Io approaches the frozen noblewoman. Hoping to lift her heavy spirits, the sweet gardener boy eagerly asks if she would like to see a mythical black freesia. Reminding her of how beautifully the black roses suited her, Io cheerfully declares that dark freesias would look absolutely stunning on her. Pointing to his secret garden patch, the dedicated boy proudly reveals he has been desperately trying to cultivate the legendary dark blooms. Admitting that the flowers are incredibly rare and borderline illusory, Io vows to do his absolute best to grow them for his beloved lady. Ophelia smiles warmly and tells Io that his feelings alone are enough of a reward. Io earnestly expresses his deep gratitude for her kindness and the delicious sweets, wishing he could somehow return the favor. Ophelia silently reflects that Io is a sweet boy living in this world, reminding herself not to feel guilty since he isn't just a program's secret command. Flashing a gentle smile, Ophelia invites the flustered gardener's apprentice to join her for some tea. The scene shifts to a beautifully arranged garden setting as they prepare to share a peaceful tea time together. A dazzling, magical aura sparkles around them, setting a completely joyful mood. Ophelia enthusiastically offers Io rooibos tea and scones, encouraging him to eat as much as he likes. Io marvels at the bread-like cookies with absolute delight, eager to try them with fresh cream and jam. Ophelia fondly recalls how the head chef taught her to make lemon jelly long ago. Remembering how Felix recently praised her dessert, a sudden dread washes over her as she wonders if her doom was sealed from that very moment. A cheerful Io offers to wash the dishes, happily praising Lady Ophelia's superb sweets. Relieved by Io's company, Ophelia promises to bring him his favorite snacks for another tea party so she doesn't have to face tomorrow alone. A sudden, terrifying presence shatters the peaceful atmosphere, completely cutting off their conversation. Ophelia screams for Io to hide as a horrifying butterfly of the moonless night materializes out of nowhere, gleefully seeking human prey. Ophelia panics internally, trapped with Io and terrified that the game script is forcing her death before the actual execution event. Desperate to survive, she remembers that users of the dark attribute can actually communicate with these sinister creatures. Stepping forward bravely, Ophelia tries to negotiate with the dark fairy, assuring it they mean absolutely no harm. Raising her voice, she desperately promises to fulfill any desire the creature might have in exchange for their lives. She frantically urges Io to stay hidden while she braces herself for the monster's potentially horrific demands. To her shock, the butterfly pauses to consider her offer, proving that her dark attribute communication is actually working. The terrifying monster bursts into laughter and completely surprises Ophelia by demanding to gorge itself on sugary sweet flowers. Thrilled that she understands its words, the butterfly eagerly awaits its treat while a deeply relieved Ophelia agrees to prepare it. The dark fairy points directly to the surrounding flower beds, demanding the significantly sweeter blooms right there. Ophelia nervously realizes the monster has extremely high standards, certain it wants the exceptionally cultivated flowers nearby. A sudden, blinding flash of magic completely interrupts the exchange, causing the dark fairy to violently flinch. Lord Liam dramatically steps onto the scene, his hand outstretched as he casts his powerful magic to intervene. Liam rushes over to check on Ophelia, who earnestly thanks him for saving them from a hopeless situation. The impassive priest smoothly dismisses her gratitude, stating that defeating the creatures of the moonless night is simply his duty. Ophelia watches Liam closely, suspecting he is just trying to hide his embarrassment, but sincerely thanks him anyway. Liam firmly insists on escorting Ophelia back to the girls' dormitory, warning that more butterflies could still be lurking around. Ophelia finds his protective offer incredibly strange, especially since the devastating conviction event is looming so close. Noticing her prolonged silence, Liam bluntly asks if she is disappointed that he isn't Prince Felix. Ophelia quickly denies it, genuinely thanking him for personally escorting her and ensuring Io's safety as well. Liam notices her sudden distress as she stares blankly at the ground, completely lost in her own dark thoughts. Io bravely insists on staying behind to clean up the horrific remains of the butterfly, urging the nobles to go on ahead. Liam strictly forbids it, declaring the area too dangerous to be alone, and helps them quickly clean up the mess together. Staring at the beautiful flowers, Ophelia quietly accepts that spending the last day of her freedom like this wasn't so bad after all. The fateful day of the devastating conviction event finally arrives, signaling the absolute climax of the story. A worried maid asks if Lady Ophelia truly intends to wear such a dark and ominous dress for the critical event. Despite acknowledging that black is the color of mourning, the loyal maid passionately declares that Ophelia is still the most beautiful woman in the world. The scene opens in silence as Ophelia approaches the imposing estate gates. Realizing he did not wait for her as expected, she steps forward with the bitter thought that she has no choice but to go alone. She finally arrives at her destination, her name hanging in the heavy air. Liam and Alvin sit at the elegant tea table, flatly stating they have been awaiting her arrival. The tension mounts with this simple gathering. Someone officially announces that everyone is now present. Felix glares at her, declaring his shame as her fiancé and questioning why she would do such a terrible thing. He reveals his shocking decision to marry Alicia instead. With brutal finality, Felix proclaims that his engagement with Ophelia is over. Furious, Ophelia demands if he truly plans to marry a commoner over a duke's daughter, insisting such a thing shouldn't even be allowed. She accuses Alicia of stealing Felix, but is stunned to learn he has already received permission from His Majesty. Dark, hateful thoughts swirl in her mind as she violently wishes to destroy Alicia's smiling face. Clenching her fist, she reminds herself of her noble Lulake blood, vowing not to accept condemnation or choose destruction. The intense moment breaks when she is politely offered a seat and some tea. Ophelia notes that the tense air makes this a terrible atmosphere for a tea party, a sharp contrast to how they could talk just yesterday. Even the usually cheerful Alvin remains quiet, looking as if he is waiting for something to happen. Gesturing to the visible flower bed, Felix formally thanks everyone for coming to the tea party. He announces that he called them all here because there is something they need to hear. Ophelia's heart thumps wildly as Felix directly addresses their engagement. Recognizing lines from the game's condemnation event, she notices he wears a pained expression of restraint that never existed originally. Felix asks Klaus to explain the circumstances, passing the floor to him. Klaus speaks directly, revealing that Lady Alicia has been blessed with powers from the goddess Phrygia. He bluntly states that Prince Felix will marry the Shrine Maiden, and Ophelia will be asked to step down as fiancée. Echoes of outrage ring in Ophelia's memories as she refuses to allow such nonsense. Klaus lists the various problems that happened since Alicia's pen was broken, making Ophelia dread Felix seeing her as a villain. Ophelia fiercely defends herself, swearing she has never done anything to harm Lady Alicia and demanding proof. Felix admits he has spent many years with Ophelia and is inclined to believe she would never do such a thing. However, he states that the words of goddess Phrygia's Shrine Maiden are more believable. With the moonless night's butterflies increasing, Felix makes his decision as crown prince because the Shrine Maiden's existence cannot be ignored. Klaus notes that formal paperwork is required to break the engagement, but Felix's expression already speaks volumes about their relationship. Klaus mentions he heard about the problems Lady Alicia raised, expressing disbelief that a duke's daughter would do such terrible things. He adds that treating the Shrine Maiden so cruelly is not something that can be forgiven, even as a priest. Alicia bursts into tears, sobbing that she would have run away from everything if she had been alone. A companion rushes to comfort her, assuring her that they are all here for her. Watching them rally around Alicia, Ophelia bitterly wonders if playing the tragic, crying heroine is all it takes to make them believe her lies. She looks toward her conflicted fiancé, quietly calling out to Prince Felix. Felix struggles to announce the end of their engagement before Klaus urges him to move on to the main announcement. A heavy gulp echoes through the tense silence. Suddenly, a hurried boy bursts in with a basket, loudly apologizing for interrupting because he is incredibly busy. He begins replanting the flower bed, causing Alicia to gasp and furiously demand he put her planted freesias back immediately. A dark, blooming cluster of black freesia flowers is beautifully showcased against a glowing background. Rushing over while panting, the gardener Io explains he replanted the old flowers to make room for these black freesias because he promised to show them to Lady Ophelia. Ophelia gently thanks Io and tells him to take his time appreciating the blooms before he excuses himself to finish his replanting duties. Alicia suddenly panics and screams not to be ridiculous, realizing that because the flower bed reflects the capture target's affection, the heroine's flowers are gone and only the villainess's remain. A voice cuts through the tense atmosphere, softly calling out Ophelia's name. Startled by the sudden interruption, a blushing Ophelia turns and hesitantly calls out to Prince Felix. Prince Felix suddenly wraps Ophelia in a tight embrace, apologizing profusely as he admits he has no idea why he tried to say something so cruel to her. Holding her close, Felix explains that spending time with Lady Alicia made him feel completely disconnected from his own body, as if he was being manipulated by the forces of the game. Ophelia realizes Felix was desperately resisting the narrative force, knowing full well that if he had failed, she would have been unfairly condemned. Gently touching her tear-stained cheek, Felix playfully chides Ophelia for ruining her good looks with crying, even though he is shedding tears himself. Ophelia looks up at him in surprise, her wide eyes wet with confused tears. Leaning in with deep affection, Felix tenderly kisses Ophelia, confirming that his true feelings lie with her. Pulling back slightly, Felix smiles and teases that her tears taste salty, drawing a flustered gasp from Ophelia. The two gaze lovingly into each other's eyes, sharing a deeply intimate and joyful moment of reconciliation. Ophelia reflects that if this were truly just a video game, the story would have ended right here with the villainess living happily ever after with the crown prince. Shattering the romantic atmosphere, Alicia furiously demands to know what is happening, screaming at the other lords because she believes Felix is supposed to marry her. Flailing wildly, an enraged Alicia questions why all the capture targets are suddenly taking Lady Ophelia's side. Klaus calmly apologizes but states they must prioritize serving the crown prince over his engagement to the shrine maiden, prompting Alicia to insist this completely violates her holy status. Grabbing her chest, Alicia screams that she never wanted to pledge her entire life to serving the temple as the Phrygia maiden. Panic completely overtakes Alicia when she looks down and realizes the legendary flower mark proving her status as the shrine maiden has suddenly vanished from her chest. Klaus coldly deduces that Alicia was simply pretending to be the shrine maiden, noting that historical literature mentions absolutely nothing about the holy mark disappearing. Brushing off her frantic claims that the proof was there earlier, Klaus bluntly declares her excuse is useless and confirms she is a fraud. Desperate, Alicia begs Lord Alvin to believe her, but he sternly questions if she intentionally made an enemy of the temple by faking her divine status. Alvin coldly adds that while he would normally help a maiden in distress, her blatant lies make it impossible for him to defend her now. A smug smile crosses Alicia's face as she taunts Ophelia, claiming a villainess has no right to be standing on the center stage. Felix sharply rebukes Alicia, warning her that her inappropriate behavior and tendency to treat real life like a strategy game completely disqualifies her from ruling as queen. He points out her repeated disrespect toward the very people she relies on for her future, telling her she is now entirely on her own. Ophelia steps forward, coolly telling Alicia she should be much more aware of her actions if she wants to navigate high society and the reverse harem route. Laughing like a maniac, Alicia completely dismisses their concerns, loudly declaring that this entire world is nothing more than a simple game. Twirling in her dress, she selfishly insists that as the heroine of the world, she naturally deserves to have fun and be with all the characters she loves. Appalled by her callousness, Ophelia asks if Alicia seriously doesn't care about hurting people simply because she views them as fictional characters. Alicia casually brushes off the accusation, treating the very real human feelings of Prince Felix and the others as nothing more than expected programming. Driven to her absolute breaking point by Alicia's sociopathic detachment, Ophelia tightly winds up her arm to deliver a punishing blow. With a resounding impact, Ophelia fiercely slaps Alicia across the face, sending the self-proclaimed heroine reeling backward as she cries out. A sinister butterfly of the moonless night shatters as Alicia arrogantly laughs, mocking Ophelia for thinking she would actually land a meaningful hit on the heroine. Smiling through the violent attack, Alicia calmly states it doesn't matter if she dies because she will simply respawn in a brand new game. Brimming with toxic pride, Alicia claims that intentionally taking damage to defeat stronger enemies is just a highly efficient way to farm affection points in an otome game. In a raw display of unbridled fury, Ophelia grabs Alicia and viciously slaps her a second time, refusing to let the twisted delusion continue. Tears falling from her eyes, Ophelia screams that this is real life, harshly condemning Alicia for selfishly putting Felix and the others in mortal danger. Clutching her stinging cheek, a genuinely shocked Alicia finally feels the burning physical pain, her delusion cracking as she mutters that it was supposed to be just a game. Collapsing to the ground in severe pain, a battered figure cries out as the agonizing consequences of their actions finally take hold. Watching the pitiful display, Ophelia realizes Lady Alicia deliberately chose the death route because she arrogantly assumed her reincarnation was just a replay of a familiar video game. It dawns on Ophelia that Alicia was genuinely enjoying herself, treating the real world and its people as nothing more than a source of entertainment. Lord Klaus officially announces that Alicia will be placed under house arrest in the royal castle while they confirm the truth and determine her ultimate punishment. The others solemnly agree to Klaus's decision, accepting the immediate course of action regarding the disgraced false heroine. Kneeling before Ophelia, the young men sincerely apologize for their rudeness at the tea party and pledge their unwavering loyalty to ensure they never repeat their mistakes. Though Prince Felix believes he can protect his fiancée alone, the others insist on serving as her guards to keep her safe from the increasing threat of the moonless night's butterflies. Grateful for their renewed support, Ophelia resolves to become a noble lady worthy of Felix and vows to help him overcome their upcoming challenges. As they prepare to head to the academy, Ophelia nervously notices the staring crowd, hyper-aware of the public attention focused entirely on them. Ignoring the gossiping onlookers, Felix gently offers his hand to escort his fair lady away from the prying eyes. Watching the couple, Ophelia notes Lord Liam's amused expression and playfully wonders if escorting her is officially part of their new guard duties. Unable to hide his lingering guilt, one of her newly appointed guards awkwardly apologizes for being so forceful with his protective measures. Taking the initiative to escort her, Felix firmly refuses to hand over the role, reminding Ophelia of the game's mechanic where capture targets become highly protective as their affection increases. Discussing Alicia's fate, they reveal that since she is still a student, she will only face 3 months of probation instead of the villainess's typical death sentence. Despite avoiding execution, Alicia's future is effectively ruined, as having a criminal record will make it nearly impossible for her to serve the royal castle or marry into the aristocracy. Muttering quietly, Ophelia hopes Alicia will use this harsh reality check to change her ways, while someone nearby unexpectedly stabs the ground in frustration. Overwhelmed by self-loathing and guilt for listening to Alicia's lies, a gloomy guard sulks, feeling as though Ophelia is silently judging his past mistakes. To ease his straightforward and apologetic nature, Ophelia gently suggests they plant flowers together, assuring the frustrated young man that his sincere feelings are more than enough. Brightening at the idea, they discuss planting the flowers in separate pots to exchange as presents to decorate their rooms instead of simply placing them in the garden. Flattered by the sweet gesture, Ophelia happily imagines the various types of beautiful flowers they could grow and exchange with one another. Pondering the perfect choice, she debates between a noble white, Felix's signature yellow, or perhaps a flower that matches the distinct blue of her own hair. Ultimately, Felix enthusiastically suggests a red freesia, hoping the romantic bloom will ensure Ophelia is always thinking of him. Her heart pounding at his bold suggestion, Ophelia blushes deeply as he eagerly asks for her opinion on his charming idea. Overcome with nervousness and joy, Ophelia realizes how much closer they have become, her heart racing as she happily anticipates their future marriage. Suddenly, Ophelia's maid Corinne barges into the room, slamming the door open and crying out her lady's name in a frantic panic. Startled by the abrupt intrusion, Ophelia turns to her distressed maid and calmly asks what could possibly be the matter. Catching her breath, Corinne politely serves tea and urges Ophelia to take her time while she prepares to explain the exciting situation. Gossiping excitedly about the courtyard lunch, Corinne gushes over Felix's incredibly bold and forward behavior toward Ophelia. A flashback reveals a deeply affectionate Felix offering a bite of food to a flustered Ophelia, treating her with undeniable adoration. Praising his delicious homemade cooking, Ophelia happily accepts the meal, completely freezing in shock when Felix makes a surprisingly intense comment. Digging himself into an embarrassing grave, a blushing Felix intensely declares that he will never let her go even if he is reborn, insisting on calling her Ophi to prove she is entirely his. Gazing deeply into her eyes, Felix passionately claims that her beautiful dark blue eyes and gorgeous hair belong exclusively to him. Heart racing wildly, Ophelia panics as Felix leans in, desperately asking if he can touch her more freely to express his overwhelming affection. Teasing the flustered couple, Liam casually remarks that they should have just gone all the way, prompting a defensive denial and playful speculations about Felix being a secret coward. Embarrassed by the memory, Ophelia sighs that she initially thought Liam was just minding someone else's business before his teasing escalated. Noticing her recently gloomy mood, Corinne expresses relief that her beloved mistress is finally feeling better and acting like herself again. Ophelia admits that with Alicia out of the picture, she has found some peace of mind while Felix prepares their daily lunches and the others subdue the dark butterflies. Wanting to show her deep appreciation for Felix's hard work, Ophelia eagerly decides to surprise him by cooking a homemade meal of her own. Determined to plan a menu that typically appeals to men, Ophelia excitedly brainstorms dishes while munching on madeleines, deciding to save the lemon jelly for dessert. Just as she finalizes her sweet plan, Felix unexpectedly interrupts, hesitantly asking if she could eat first regarding their upcoming lunch. Ophelia walks down a hallway while a student apologizes, mentioning that the teacher wants to speak about the upcoming school year party. The bespectacled boy notices Ophelia eating alone and casually brings up the increasing appearances of the moonless night butterflies. After successfully convincing her to let him escort her to the courtyard, the boy boasts about his previous butterfly encounter while Ophelia looks on with skepticism. Suddenly, 2 other boys intervene, arguing that they are better suited to escort her than the unsociable boy. Leaning casually against a wall, the newcomers insist on escorting her since Prince Felix is absent, leaving Ophelia utterly bewildered. Overwhelmed by the bickering between a knight, a priest, and an escort, Ophelia nervously suggests they all eat together while silently begging Felix to save her. The boys unpack their extravagant, multi-course lunches, but Ophelia proudly reveals that her meal was personally prepared by Prince Felix. The other boys eagerly show off their high-end takeaways and chef-prepared sandwiches, trying to impress her with their elite connections. Observing their heavy, meat-centric meals, Ophelia mentally formulates a balanced menu of roast beef and quiche, excitedly deciding to add her childhood favorite, lemon jelly, for dessert. Blushing awkwardly when asked if something is wrong, Ophelia silently wonders if feeding people their favorite foods increases their affection points in real life just like in the game. The boys advise her that a balanced meal requires vegetables and fish, though one notes that Felix, being a man, definitely needs meat. Smirking, one of the boys bites into an apple and claims he just wanted to eat anything Ophelia made, prompting her to politely tell him to show more interest for his attendance' sake. Flashing a radiant, closed-eye smile, Ophelia cheerfully asks him to relay her message to his attendant. Leaving the boys completely stunned, Ophelia confidently walks away while reminding them that she is Prince Felix's fiancée. The classroom door creaks open as a cheerful girl bursts in, brightly wishing everyone a good morning. Her greeting is met with absolute silence, as 3 months have passed since Alicia's condemnation event and rumors of her pretending to be the Shrine Maiden have spread everywhere. Sitting at her desk, Ophelia casts a dark, glaring look toward Alicia, internally surprised that the disgraced girl didn't leave the school. The boys agree to strengthen school security against the persistent Alicia, and Ophelia smiles warmly at their protectiveness despite feeling it might be overkill. Ophelia realizes the game should be over by now, worrying that Alicia might take desperate measures to force a peaceful conclusion and reclaim her heroine status. A sudden memory of Prince Felix leaning in close to discuss their future marriage sends a furious blush across Ophelia's face. Clutching her flushed cheeks in a daze, Ophelia scolds herself for daydreaming about marriage in the middle of a classroom while a nearby boy asks if she is okay. Prince Felix informs her he will be late for their music lesson due to teacher matters, prompting the boy to suggest he and Ophelia head to class themselves. Ophelia cheerfully accepts the invitation and heads out, leaving a classmate shocked that she is walking without her usual large entourage. Walking down the hallway, Ophelia realizes this is her perfect chance to invite Felix to dinner, though she feels incredibly nervous now that their mutual feelings are known. Felix suddenly falls into step beside her, making her heart pound wildly as another student mentions the upcoming New Year party. Hearing rumors about Alicia's unsuitability, Felix smoothly asks Ophelia to be his escort for the school-hosted event instead. Ophelia realizes the school would never allow an impostor to represent the goddess of Phrygia's annual celebration. Smiling gently, Felix reveals that he specifically chose Ophelia to be his singing partner, casting a sudden shock of gloom over her. Panicking entirely, Ophelia frantically waves her hands and insists she is nowhere near as good at singing as he is. Blushing slightly, Felix softly confesses that he simply wanted to sing with her, instantly melting her panic and prompting her to agree to practice. Her heart racing, Ophelia tentatively grabs his sleeve to stop him, gathering her courage to ask him a question. Blushing deeply, Ophelia asks if she could treat him to a homemade meal to repay him for all the lunchboxes he has made her. Looking up at him through her eyelashes, she timidly asks what he thinks of the idea while her heart pounds loudly in her chest. Felix's face lights up with pure joy as he excitedly declares he would be honored. Overjoyed and relieved, Ophelia's eyes sparkle as she expresses her gratitude and excitement to eat a homemade meal together. Smiling warmly, Felix tells her how happy he is that she invited him and assures her he is looking forward to it. Later, Ophelia happily samples her homemade roast beef in the kitchen, declaring it perfectly cooked and delicious. The maid praises Ophelia's improved culinary skills, and Ophelia giggles while deciding to serve the roast beef for dinner that night. Humming happily, Ophelia reflects that her intensive cooking lessons were entirely worth the effort, knowing her previous skills would have disappointed Felix. Cutting into the tender meat, Ophelia feels a deep sense of satisfaction now that she can successfully prepare a feast for the prince. Ophelia reflects that they spend less and less time together, as Felix is always busy and constantly interrupted by teachers or other matters. Gazing thoughtfully out the window, she notes that it feels as though an invisible force is deliberately keeping them apart when their days should finally be calm. Hoping she is merely overthinking the tense situation, she continues her wistful reflections alone. In the bustling staff room, Ophelia apologizes to Prince Felix for bringing him along, to which he warmly replies that it is perfectly fine. Suddenly, she freezes in absolute shock as she notices something completely unexpected. Feeling deeply uncomfortable, She wonders why Felix still treats Lady Alicia so normally after all the severe trouble she caused. Examining a dark flower, Ophelia questions if a hidden loophole in the game's mechanics is causing the current situation to conflict with reality. The shocking sight of Alicia standing entirely too close to an uncomfortable Felix leaves Ophelia completely stunned. With her heart pounding wildly in her chest, Ophelia quickly dashes out of the suffocating room. Panting heavily from her frantic sprint, she is horrified to see that the freesias in the flower bed have all turned red instead of black. Clenching her fists, she realizes flowers don't just change colors naturally and recalls Io explaining that the rare seeds can produce any color. Returning quickly to the flower bed, she finds Io and hesitantly asks him about a mysterious lady who supposedly came back to replant the flowers. Io cheerfully reassures her that he quickly moved the precious black freesias into separate pots for safe storage in the shed. Breathing a deep sigh of relief, Ophelia realizes that Alicia's main target is Felix and that the game's forced narrative is actively causing their recent misunderstandings. Thanking the young gardener for his quick thinking, she agrees that the rare flowers will be much happier in their new home. Io casually explains that he actually gave the leftover powder from the defeated dark butterfly to someone who specifically requested it. Staring at the flower, Ophelia kicks herself for not asking for more details, completely oblivious that the management of Frisia orchestrated this entire situation. Suddenly, a sharp voice calls out to her, aggressively demanding she wait. Alicia frantically dashes forward, furiously screaming at Ophelia and questioning what she is doing. Ophelia coolly commands Alicia not to pull out the red freesias, firmly asking her to stop making such rash and destructive statements. A desperate Alicia screams that as the true heroine, the flower bed should rightfully belong to her since she only has Felix left. Felix suddenly freezes in disgust as Alicia shamelessly admits she forced the flowers to turn red because she would live a miserable life without him. Ignoring Alicia's pathetic tantrum, Felix casually turns to Ophelia and softly asks if she prefers black freesias over the red ones. Ophelia worries that she might have offended him earlier, vividly recalling all the times Felix was abruptly pulled away by his royal duties. She finally voices her hidden frustration, explaining that she thought they would be alone for dinner but urgent business keeps bringing Alicia around him. Continuing her honest confession, Ophelia admits that seeing him grow closer to the others makes her feel incredibly uncomfortable and neglected. Staring intently ahead, Felix's expression shifts to one of serious and quiet determination. He explains that his choice of black over his signature red wasn't meant to push her away, adding that he finds her genuine care for the flowers undeniably cute. Handing her a beautiful red freesia, Felix gently asks her to look at him since red is supposedly her true color. Utterly dazed by the sudden romantic gesture, Ophelia listens in shock as he formally declares his love and asks for her honest answer. Blushing deeply, she smiles back and sincerely tells Prince Felix that she loves him too, hoping their romantic bond will last forever. Overjoyed by her confession, Felix leans in and boldly asks if he can kiss his cute future queen right there in the garden. Covering his face in sheer embarrassment, a flustered Felix realizes he rushed the game's confession event, completely shocking Ophelia. Ophelia realizes she loves his genuine confession the most precisely because she has watched it so many times through the screen. Back in her room, a blushing Ophelia decides to put the flowers by her bed while her perceptive maid Corinne tactfully excuses herself to brew tea. The beautiful bouquet of red freesias sits perfectly arranged in a vase, catching the soft, sparkling light from the window. Gazing warmly at the pretty flowers, she happily remembers Felix tenderly asking if he could kiss her right then and there. Rolling wildly on her bed, a completely flustered Ophelia screams into her pillow as she frantically wonders if she actually would have let him do it. Overwhelmed by deep affection, she admits to herself that she definitely wanted him to kiss her because she truly loves him. Finally settling down with a peaceful smile, she basks in her overwhelming happiness before suddenly pausing in sudden confusion. Ophelia reflects on her second life as a reborn villainess fated for execution, realizing she has finally achieved her goal of a peaceful, happy life. A maid abruptly interrupts her thoughts, announcing that her black tea is ready and a letter from Prince Felix has arrived. Ophelia eagerly rushes to retrieve the letter, startling the maids as she crashes through the door panting heavily. Reading the letter, she discovers Felix is inviting her to dine at his private palace quarters the day after tomorrow. Flustered by the sudden invitation, she rushes into the kitchen to prepare the vegetables while the residual heat remains. To her surprise, the head chef has already cut the vegetables for her, explaining he started doing it when Prince Felix made bentos. Ophelia realizes this is the cook Felix mentioned, noting that helping prepare the ingredients must have become a habit for him. The chef warmly remarks that Ophelia looks just like Felix did when he was thoughtfully making bentos for her. Touched by the thought of Felix making her bentos in this very kitchen every day, she thanks the chef warmly. The chef tells her the meal is ready and urges her to go be with Prince Felix while they handle the rest. Felix warmly welcomes her into the room, saying he has been eagerly waiting for her arrival. Ophelia marvels at his sophisticated private quarters, though she humbly credits the head chef for helping with the impressive food. They sit down to eat, with Ophelia sitting stiffly and feeling incredibly nervous as Felix tries the food. Felix highly praises the carrot-based dressing and perfectly cooked roast beef, utterly delighting Ophelia. Noticing she hasn't touched her food due to nerves, Felix gently encourages her not to hold back and to eat with him. Relieved that he genuinely likes the meal, Ophelia finally takes a bite and thanks the head chef internally. Felix pats the seat next to him on the sofa, inviting her to come closer. Stiff with nervousness about him hearing her heartbeat, she squeezes beside him and brings up that Alicia hasn't returned to the dorms. Ophelia immediately apologizes for ruining the mood, but Felix assures her it is fine and everyone will eventually know. Felix reveals that Alicia dropped out because she lost her special student status due to her suspension and couldn't afford the expensive tuition. He explains that her aggressive replanting of the flower bed was a desperate, last-ditch effort. Holding her close, Felix promises to do anything to ease her sorrows, prompting her to thank him for telling her the truth. Felix offers to give Alicia a harsher punishment if she desires, but Ophelia declines, simply wanting to be a queen who doesn't embarrass him. Deeply moved by her words, Felix pulls her into a sudden, tight embrace. He kisses her deeply, confessing he has been holding back and that being alone in his room made him realize how happy she makes him. The intense kiss leaves Ophelia struggling to breathe as she feels his tongue, her eyes widening in shock. Pulling back slightly, Felix teases that she might die of embarrassment if they continue, promising to do more later despite wanting to kiss her more. He laughs warmly at her flustered reaction when she stammers in disbelief about doing more. Smiling tenderly while holding her head, he clearly confesses his love for her. Blushing happily with tears in her eyes, Ophelia returns his feelings, confirming she loves him too. They sit peacefully together, imagining a future filled with happy, idle chit-chat. The narrative mysteriously hints that the story of them noticing the mark of the saintess appearing on Ophelia's chest the moment they kissed is a tale for later. Suddenly, the scene shifts to the real world where game developers are excitedly reading reviews about the trending villainous route. The developers rejoice over players loving the redemption arc, hoping the high ratings will secure them an extra budget. One of the developers suddenly suggests that the villainous route needs its own dedicated hero. They argue that the original love interests, including Ophelia's fiancé Felix, were designed specifically as heroes for Alicia's route. With that in mind, they passionately agree that introducing a brand new hero exclusively for Ophelia's route would be fair game. Brainstorming fresh angles like sibling dynamics, they enthusiastically approve the idea to avoid doing her an injustice. One developer raises a hand, insisting they want this new hero to feel special, noting that the noble-born trope is overdone. Another developer chimes in, suggesting that maybe this new character shouldn't be introduced exactly as an ally. Reviewing character profiles, a game developer points out that the villainous Ophelia serves as the final boss capable of controlling the dark butterflies. Bursting with excitement, an energetic developer loudly declares that their game desperately needs an ultimate hidden boss. Frantically racing against the clock, the team dives into compiling specs and drafting concept art without a single second to waste. Exhausted but triumphant, the dedicated developers finally complete their grueling work and celebrate the creation of the ultimate hidden boss. Back in reality, a somber Ophelia gazes silently into her mirror as she reflects on her sudden shift in fate. Greeted warmly by her maid Karen, Ophelia mentally reels in shock over the unexpected invitation into Prince Felix's private chambers. Blushing fiercely, she recalls the intense emotions from the day they first shared that deeply intimate moment. Noticing her mistress's sheer exhaustion, Karen gently suggests drawing a warm milk bath to help her finally relax. Carefully untying the delicate ribbons of her dress, Karen listens as Ophelia confesses her lingering nervousness from the day's overwhelming events. Suddenly pausing her gentle work, a wide-eyed Karen gasps and calls out her mistress's name in sheer disbelief. Looking down in absolute horror, Ophelia is stunned to discover the radiant mark of the priestess of Phrygia glowing brightly upon her own chest. Staring at the undeniable proof, Karen breathlessly confirms that the legendary holy mark has physically manifested on Ophelia. Grasping the terrifying implications, Ophelia realizes Alicia has lost her holy status and the narrative role of the heroine has violently shifted to her. Snapping her out of her panic thoughts, Karen swiftly drapes a warm towel over her bare shoulders to ward off the chill. Beaming with profound pride, Karen praises her mistress, declaring that a lady as brilliant and composed as Ophelia naturally deserves the sacred title. Desperate to contain the volatile situation, Ophelia quickly presses a finger to her lips and orders her maid to keep the divine revelation an absolute secret. Sinking into the warm water, Ophelia realizes the permanent mark pulses with faint mana and grants the holy magic needed to destroy the dark butterflies. Sinking deeper in despair, she realizes her natural dark affinity makes wielding holy magic an impossible burden she is entirely unequipped to bear. Steeling her resolve with thoughts of Felix's warm smile, she vows to stop making weak excuses so she can fiercely protect their peaceful future. Clenching her dripping fist, she firmly reminds herself that she intentionally chose the treacherous path of the villainess. Eyes burning with absolute determination, the so-called villainess violently rejects her tragic fate and swears she will seize her own happiness. Thrusting her fist forward, she vows to crush whatever obstacles the narrative throws at her to secure a joyous future. Drying off, she reflects on the initial shock of her reincarnation just as Karen anxiously peeks through the bathroom door. Catching her mistress staring anxiously at the glowing symbol, Karen softly asks if the holy mark is causing her distress. Gently adjusting her mistress's collar, Karen warmly insists the mark is undeniable proof of the goddess's favor and urges her to hold her head high. Deeply moved by her maid's unwavering support, a grateful Ophelia smiles brightly and thanks Karen for the much-needed encouragement. The following morning brings the end of the school year, and a refreshed Ophelia bids Karen farewell as she heads out for the closing ceremony. Waiting patiently for her arrival, a beaming Prince Felix raises his hand and warmly wishes his beloved a good morning. Returning his greeting, Ophelia expresses her sadness that the upcoming winter break will cruelly separate them for an extended period. Escorted by Felix, she is respectfully greeted by the other young lords, who have continuously flocked to her side since their prior apologies. The tense conversation quickly shifts to official temple reports confirming a terrifying surge in the appearance of mutated dark butterflies. Rubbing his chin in deep concern, a stressed Felix sighs heavily as he questions why the monstrous swarm is so unprecedented this year. While Ophelia secretly recognizes the apocalyptic event as the game's Millennium Surge, a highly protective Felix sternly forbids her from ever wandering outside alone. Sweating nervously under their intense gaze, she frantically searches for an excuse since she cannot confess her reincarnated knowledge of the game's lore. Drawing their weapons in solidarity, the fierce young lords proudly declare themselves an unbeatable party ready to lay down their lives to protect her. Captivated by Felix's reassuring smile, Ophelia firmly decides she must at least reveal the secret of her holy mark to her loyal protectors. Gathering her courage, she pulls Felix aside and nervously requests a private moment after the ceremony to share something incredibly important. Clasping his hands together tightly, a deeply overjoyed Felix revels in the sheer bliss of being personally invited by his beloved. Later in an abandoned classroom, a blushing Felix eagerly asks what critical secret she needs to share in such absolute privacy. Trembling with overwhelming embarrassment, Ophelia instantly regrets stationing guards outside the locked door, fearing she won't survive if he starts fiercely flirting. Turning away with a serious expression, Felix warns that his news might be hard to believe, but Ophelia urgently interrupts him to declare she has something important to share. Clutching her chest with a resolute blush, she reveals to a stunned Felix that she has manifested the mark proving she is Phrygia's priestess. Gently holding his hands, she explains that the mark appeared the night they had dinner and acknowledges how shockingly sudden this revelation must be. Sitting closely beside her on the sofa, Felix warmly thanks her for telling him, acknowledging the immense courage it took to share such a secret. Surprised by his deep understanding, she gasps as he accurately points out that bearing such a mythical mark must feel incredibly frightening and guilt-inducing. Realizing he saw right through her facade, she silently admits her deep-seated fear but resolves not to deny her destiny so easily. Gazing up at him with profound trust, she declares that having him by her side makes her feel utterly invincible. Pleading with vulnerable eyes, he asks her to stay by his side forever, to which she readily agrees that he is the only one who belongs with her. Suddenly covering his fiercely blushing face in embarrassment, He apologizes for his inappropriate royal behavior and urges her to momentarily forget his intense confession. Recovering his composure, he teasingly reminds a bewildered Ophelia that her new priestess mark legally allows her to take multiple husbands, warning he might die of jealousy if she does. Horrified as she suddenly recalls the game's reverse harem mechanics, she mentally spirals in deep embarrassment for completely forgetting that crucial detail. Pulling her into a desperate embrace, he admits his selfish fears, prompting her to firmly declare that he is her one and only fiancé. Melting into his arms with a tender smile, she finds it incredibly cute that he actually got jealous over a mere hypothetical situation. Playfully offended, he asks if she is calling him small-minded, but she joyfully reassures him that she absolutely loves his protective possessiveness. Shifting to a serious, strategic tone, they decide to privately test her newly awakened powers during the upcoming winter break before planning any public announcements. Exhaling a massive sigh of relief, she agrees they must proceed carefully because her heart could never handle an immediate public revelation. Breaking the serious tension, Felix boldly catches her off guard by asking if he can actually see the sacred mark for himself. Trembling with flushed embarrassment, she slowly begins unbuttoning her dress to prove her claim, frantically reminding herself that showing the mark isn't indecent. Exposing the glowing emblem on her chest while hyper-aware of his intense gaze, she grants him permission to look despite her wildly racing heart. Gazing at her chest in sheer awe, he calls the mark beautiful and notes that it is faintly pulsating with the goddess Phrygia's legendary mana. Thanking her for the immense trust, he gently steps closer to tie her dress ribbon back together, making her flinch with flustered surprise. Finishing the knot with incredibly graceful fingers, he leaves her silently screaming internally as her heart threatens to burst from her chest. Gazing up at him with utter adoration, she begins to softly thank him for his tender help. Seizing the romantic moment, he abruptly leans in for a sudden kiss, cheekily blaming her for staring at him so deeply. Reeling from the sneak attack kiss, she quickly changes the subject, admitting she has one more nerve-wracking thing to tell him. Catching him completely off guard, she formally extends a sudden, highly personal invitation to the bewildered prince. Staring at him earnestly, she officially asks if he would honor her family by visiting her domain over the upcoming winter break. Sitting side by side in a grand carriage, Ophelia beams with radiant joy as they finally arrive at her winter-draped homeland. Admiring the giant water wheel and crisp air, Felix praises the timeless beauty of Lake while Ophelia revels in deep nostalgia. Spotting her grand family manor in the distance, she proudly shares that their domain's agricultural produce is renowned even across international borders. Pulling up to the estate, she is immediately swept into a warm, joyous greeting by her beaming father who is thrilled to see her looking so well. Her glamorous mother, Canaria, quickly scolds her husband for hogging their daughter, eagerly stepping forward to claim her own long-awaited reunion. Pulling her into a crushing, affectionate hug, Canaria loudly declares that Ophelia is the absolute cutest girl in the world. Watching them bicker with love, she feels immense pride for her fiercely capable parents who flawlessly manage both dangerous hunts and high-society salons. Stepping aside to redirect her family's overwhelming attention, she formally announces that she brought a very special guest with her this time. Her father instantly drops to a respectful kneel, apologizing for the delayed greeting and humbly welcoming His Highness to their relaxing countryside estate. Graciously shaking her father's hand, Felix thanks them for their hospitality, while the Lord warmly insists that the prince is already considered family. As they prepare to head inside, Ophelia suddenly spots a striking, unfamiliar dark-haired man leaning against the manor doors who doesn't resemble a mere servant. Striding forward with a confident smirk, the mysterious man introduces himself as Dark and shockingly addresses her as his little sister. Completely blindsided by the impossible revelation, Ophelia freezes in utter bewilderment as the words echo in her mind. Startled by her parents' sudden announcement, Ophelia learns they adopted a boy a year older than her to be her new older brother. The newly adopted Dark Lake casually greets Prince Felix, leaving Ophelia utterly horrified by his blatant lack of respect. Felix simply laughs off the casual greeting, finding Dark's blunt honesty far more refreshing than stiff formality. Glaring at her new brother, Ophelia mentally scolds him for his unbelievable rudeness, a trait Dark smugly confirms. Dark effortlessly projects the image of flawless perfection, boasting first-rate magic, a brilliant mind, and the captivating allure typical of his homeland. Despite his supposed perfection, a deeply annoyed Ophelia continues to pout over her brother's infuriating attitude. Snapping back to the present tea time, Ophelia apologizes for Dark's behavior just as he pops up making a ridiculous squirrel expression. Scolding him firmly, she declares his dismissive attitude completely unacceptable and a direct insult to Prince Felix. Sipping his tea gracefully, Felix brushes off the concern, casually attributing her strictness to her mother's well-known etiquette training. Suspecting Dark is perfectly capable of behaving in public, Ophelia realizes he simply chooses to drop his manners in private. Remembering the grueling tea ceremony drills she endured, she wholeheartedly agrees that her mother is incredibly strict about proper manners. Sweating nervously, she realizes that if her brother is being rude completely on purpose, the situation is actually much worse. Chuckling warmly, Felix admits he truly doesn't mind the disrespect and is genuinely curious to see how boldly Dark will rise. Refusing to let it slide, Ophelia firmly asks Felix to warn her if Dark ever crosses the line before dropping the subject. Leaning in close, Felix tenderly wraps his arms around her, pulling her into a warm embrace. Capturing her lips in a gentle yet possessive kiss, he effortlessly melts away all of her lingering tension. Melting into his arms, Ophelia completely surrenders to the overwhelming affection of the man she loves. Reaching out his hand, Felix softly announces that they have finally arrived at their destination. Having traveled to a quiet lake away from the manor, an incredibly nervous Ophelia prepares to test her holy magic for the very first time. Sensing her anxiety through her cold hands, Felix gently grasps them and reassuringly promises she will do just fine. Deeply moved by his unwavering support, Ophelia tightly grips his hand and silently vows to do her absolute best. Interlocking their fingers intimately, a glowing Felix boldly declares that from now on he is the only one allowed to warm her. As he asks her to stay by his side forever, she wonders if his sudden possessiveness stems from the game's multiple husband mechanic regarding the priestess. Blushing deeply, she reassures him that she belongs to him alone, a promise that brings a deeply satisfied smile to his face. Flustered by the heavy romantic atmosphere, she hastily steps back and suggests they finally try out her magic. Recalling the game's lore, she remembers the priestess of Phrygia can cast 6 holy spells, including the prayers of healing, sword, and shield. The repertoire also includes light and purification, culminating in Phrygia's prayer, a devastating attack spell strictly limited to boss fights. Since no one is injured to heal, she decides to cast the prayer of the sword, feeling a sudden, comforting surge of divine mana from her mark. Clasping her hands devoutly, she calls upon the prayer of the sword, blessing Felix with the power to protect the world. A radiant aura envelopes Felix as he marvels at the incredible surge of holy affinity actively increasing his attack power. Thrilled by her success, Ophelia eagerly asks him to test the powerful enhancement on both his sword and magic abilities. Pointing decisively at a distant boulder, Felix channels the boosted magic and unleashes a devastating flame blade. A massive array of glowing magical swords materializes in the air, blasting toward the targeted rock with overwhelming force. The heavy boulder spectacularly shatters into pieces, utterly obliterated by the tremendously amplified attack. Wide-eyed at the sheer destruction, Felix openly praises the highly coveted power of the priestess. Ophelia realizes Felix must have fought alongside Alicia and wonders if the false heroine's magic lacked this crucial buffing effect. It dawns on her that Alicia selfishly used only attack magic, leaving the male leads to fight brutal battles without any support spells. Delighted by her newfound utility, Ophelia pledges to back him up with support magic, which Felix gratefully equates to having 100 men. Suddenly noticing a minor scratch on Felix's hand from the flying rock chips, she spots the perfect opportunity for another spell. Clasping her hands once more, she softly chants the prayer of healing to mend his minor wound. Relieved and triumphant, Ophelia celebrates as she successfully casts a beginner holy healing spell to close a wound. Embarrassed to be closely watched by Felix, she stubbornly insists on continuing her practice despite his concerns. Gently intervening, Felix notes that she has burned through her mana and suggests they take it easy and rest. They sit together enjoying a peaceful tea break, surrounded by the beautiful natural scenery of her favorite spot. Sipping the rosehip tea, Ophelia happily notes how heavenly it tastes now that her stamina and mana are completely drained. Felix thoughtfully points out that a priestess's strong holy power is highly effective against the dangerous butterflies. Gazing deeply into her eyes, Felix promises that if she chooses to fight danger, he will always be near to protect her. Looking away slightly, he bashfully admits that his instinct to protect her might just be a stubborn man thing. Dropping his playful demeanor, Felix honestly confesses that he truly doesn't want her stepping onto a battlefield. Feeling like a burden, Ophelia sadly admits she has spent her entire life simply being the one who is protected. She explains that she originally planned to support him politically because she believed she lacked the strength to fight. Looking at her hands with newfound determination, she boldly declares that she now possesses the power to fight. Meeting his gaze with absolute resolve, she vows to stand beside him in battle when she officially becomes his wife. Felix silently absorbs the heavy weight and fierce determination behind her deeply heartfelt words. Smiling in quiet surrender, Felix accepts that he cannot stop her and promises to be her sword. Ophelia reflects internally, wondering if an invisible force is forcing the story to follow a predetermined script. Clenching her fists, she firmly rejects the thought, refusing to believe her genuine feelings are fabricated by destiny. Reincarnated or not, she resolves to grow stronger to protect the precious world she was born into. Smiling tenderly, Felix gently reminds her not to push herself too hard in her pursuit of strength. Bursting with excitement over her progress, Ophelia eagerly decides to attempt just one more spell. Aiming confidently at a nearby tree, she loudly chants the prayer of purification. The attack spell fizzles out weakly, leaving Ophelia groaning in pure exhaustion and crushing disappointment. Comforting her with a gentle pat, Felix praises her for managing 2 spells and urges her to be kinder to herself. Refusing to give up, Ophelia fiercely vows to train until every clumsy spell becomes completely effortless second nature. Felix smiles warmly, genuinely telling her that he would absolutely love to see her achieve that ambitious goal. Suddenly, Dark intrudes on their quiet moment, teasingly asking if Ophelia is trying to become a stylish mage. Dark casually mentions that their parents sent him out because they trust his highness but were getting slightly worried. Pointing and laughing uproariously at her magical efforts, Dark provokes Ophelia into angrily defending her future skills. Ignoring his teasing, Ophelia internally considers asking him to tutor her since her mother praised his top-class magic. Looking slightly flustered, Dark informs Felix that a retainer back at the manor is urgently looking for him regarding a letter. Dark surprisingly offers to stay behind and keep an eye on Ophelia so Felix can head back immediately. He reassures a hesitant Felix that he will safely escort his sister back to the manor at a slower pace. Trusting the arrangement, Felix thanks Dark for the convenient heads-up and agrees to head back alone. Felix warmly tells Ophelia to be careful on her way back as they briefly part ways. Watching Felix leave, Ophelia wonders in quiet awe if Dark intentionally came all the way out here just to be kind. Blushing furiously at her scrutiny, Dark defensively downplays his actions and demands she show him her magic. Feeling confident, Ophelia decides to demonstrate her water magic, secretly hoping to impress her highly skilled brother. Immediately after she casts the spell, Dark brutally shoots her down by declaring she has absolutely zero talent. Dark relentlessly roasts her flimsy spell, leaving Ophelia utterly devastated by his brutal honesty. Handing her a meager cup, Dark mockingly notes that fetching water would be faster, leaving Ophelia desperate for a tiny bit of reassurance. Grasping her hand gently, Dark firmly instructs a flustered Ophelia to relax her body. He expertly diagnoses her magical issue, explaining that her mana is simply circulating too slowly, which naturally causes her spells to be small and sluggish. Stunned by his accurate assessment, Ophelia silently marvels at his incredible skill since even professional experts and doctors had previously claimed the cause of her magical weakness was completely unknown. Urging her to try casting her water spell once more, Dark smoothly steps in and promises to directly assist with her casting this time. As he extends his hand over her head to guide her mana flow, Ophelia gasps in sudden surprise. A brilliant light suddenly erupts from their joined efforts as a massive torrent of water magically begins to overflow from the teacup. Looking at the successfully filled cup, Ophelia cries out in sheer amazement at what they just accomplished together. Dark casually demonstrates his own overwhelming power by casting Polar Night Wind, filling Ophelia with a momentary crushing pressure as she realizes how immense his mana pool truly is. A colossal, swirling vortex of wind and ethereal petals violently erupts around them as he casually unleashes his magic. Absolutely starstruck by the display, Ophelia excitedly praises her incredible new brother, prompting a smirk from Dark as he eagerly offers to give her even more of a show. Her joyful expression instantly vanishes, immediately replaced by a look of absolute, frozen terror as something goes horribly wrong. Dark frantically apologizes for suddenly losing control of his spell and asks if she is hurt, while a thoroughly shaken Ophelia stammers out that she is completely fine. Visibly embarrassed, Dark nervously runs a hand through his hair and insists he just got carried away, leaving Ophelia quietly surprised that even her highly skilled brother makes sloppy mistakes. Ophelia silently admits she was initially terrified about suddenly gaining a brother, just as Dark warmly suggests they head back since His Highness is likely waiting for them. Staring at his retreating back, she happily reflects that they have finally managed to warm up to each other just a little bit. Closing her eyes with a gentle smile of acceptance, she softly calls out to her new brother. Back inside the manor, Ophelia quickly reconsiders their budding relationship as she scolds Dark for lounging around with his shirt unbuttoned, begging him to at least change his clothes. Yawning lazily, Dark asks her to let him be a little free in his own house and tells her not to sweat the small stuff, completely ignoring her stern reminder that they are currently in the family sitting room. Recalling that Dark is the orphaned son of her father's friend, Ophelia suddenly feels sympathetic, realizing that becoming a duke's son has drastically cut down his personal freedom. Shifting her attitude entirely, she gently offers him a freshly poured cup of her favorite herbal tea and nervously wonders if he will actually like it. Staring thoughtfully at the elegant cup, Dark confesses he had never even heard of herbal tea before coming to their estate, but assumes he will probably enjoy it. When Ophelia expresses genuine surprise that he has never tried it before, Dark explains that Lady Canaria and all the servants have been constantly praising her exquisite brewing skills. He charmingly reveals that all their high praise created a lot of pressure, leading him to decide that his very first cup simply had to be brewed personally by her. As he confidently brings the cup to his lips, a deeply flustered Ophelia anxiously hopes she can meet the impossibly high expectations everyone has set for her. Closing his eyes in pure satisfaction, Dark breaks into a handsome smile and happily confirms she absolutely nailed the incredibly fragrant brew. Genuinely praising her unique tea, Dark smoothly requests that she brew it for him again soon, prompting Ophelia to eagerly promise she will prepare entirely different blends for him next time. Dark casually points out that her face is completely red, sending Ophelia into an embarrassed panic as she stammers out of frantic denial. Seizing the comfortable moment, Ophelia boldly asks Dark to help her practice magic again in exchange for more tea, to which he teasingly reminds her she is not exactly great at it. Yielding to her earnest request with a handsome, good-natured smile that Ophelia internally deems as totally cheating, Dark affectionately gives in. Smugly declaring that Big Brother can do anything, Dark confidently promises to fix her terribly weak spells because no one else could possibly manage it. Meanwhile, a mysterious figure lurks outside beneath the moonlight, carefully observing the two and noting that their bond truly feels like genuine siblings. The ominous silence of the night is suddenly broken by the sharp, echoing clack of heavy footsteps approaching. Far from the cozy sitting room, Dark now lounges alone on an outdoor bench, clicking his tongue in pure annoyance as he refuses to accept he is the one messing up. The mysterious assassin steps from the shadows, mocking Ophelia as a pathetic priestess who pathetically struggles to fill even a simple cup of water. Barely containing her frantic urgency, the elven woman violently demands that Dark hurry up and eliminate the priestess before she becomes far too dangerous. His warm demeanor entirely erased, Dark coldly acknowledges the deadly order and firmly commands the assassin to scatter. Left alone in the dark, he chillingly reflects that Ophelia is a butterfly of the night and potentially the only woman alive who could completely destroy him. Staring ruthlessly into the night, the newly adopted brother vows to personally end Ophelia's life with his own hands very soon. His murderous aura momentarily fades as he casually leans back against the bench, genuinely admitting to himself that her exquisite herbal tea was absolutely spot on. Completely oblivious to the horrific assassination plot against her, a sleepy Ophelia yawns in her bedroom, happily reflecting on how late she stayed up talking with her new brother. Ophelia prepares for bed, realizing it's late and she shouldn't have kept him up asking for magic tips, chiding herself for getting lost in her favorite topics. Looking out the window, she is shocked to spot the mysterious butterflies of the moonless night. Spotting a familiar figure on the bench, she frantically wonders if it's her brother and panics about the danger, realizing she needs to call Felix and the others at the manor. She watches in stunned silence as the glowing butterflies flutter down toward the lone figure resting on the bench. Peering closer into the darkness, she questions if her brother is actually conversing with the ethereal creatures. Trembling in disbelief, she recalls that only people possessing a dark affinity can speak to the butterflies of the moonless night. Staring at his relaxed posture, she internally questions if her brother's true magic affinity is actually dark. Trying to rationalize the scene, she wonders if a butterfly simply happened to appear, though it certainly looked like they were actively conversing. Desperately wanting to ask him about his real affinity, she hesitates because dark magic is a taboo that many are forced to hide, hoping that if they share the same struggle they can connect. Turning away from the window with a heavy heart, she quietly hopes they can openly discuss it someday. The next day arrives with a sudden mistake as a cup of tea slips from her grasp. Felix quickly grabs her trembling hands to steady the teacup before it falls completely. A concerned Felix asks if she spilled tea on her dress or if something is bothering her, prompting Ophelia to quickly reassure him that she is fine. Flashing a strained smile, she blames her distraction on fatigue and recent events, secretly torn about hiding her brother's potential dark affinity from Felix since she lacks solid proof. Despite bracing herself for a potential threat, she notes the day passed peacefully with magic practice and New Year's party vocal rehearsals, though her brother surprisingly dropped by. Confused by his normal behavior, she reasons that merely having a dark affinity shouldn't be an issue, especially if he faces the same struggles she does. Looking deeply into his eyes, Felix gently notes that despite her burdens, she never complains. Smiling warmly from the sofa, Felix invites the tired Ophelia to come over and sleep comfortably in his arms. When a blushing Ophelia protests that her family is in the house and might see them, Felix smoothly throws a sparkling blanket over their heads to create a private canopy. Leaning in close under the intimate cover, he playfully whispers that no one can see them in here. As she squeaks his name in flustered embarrassment, Felix wraps his arms tightly around her and softly asks her not to pull away. Reminding her that she tends to carry everything alone, he insists she lean on him for once, admitting that holding her makes all his own fatigue vanish. Melting into his warm embrace, Ophelia finally relaxes and rests her head securely against his shoulder. Delighted by her submission, Felix softly praises her cute smile, making her blush harder and beg him to stop teasing her so easily. Taking advantage of their hidden sanctuary beneath the blanket, he leans in closer and gently asks for permission to kiss her, leaving her utterly mortified. With a heart-stopping and affectionate smile, he smoothly questions if he should take her flustered silence as a yes. Overwhelmed by his charm, she tightly grips his shirt and lets out a soft gasp. Staring deeply into her eyes, Felix sincerely confesses that he wants to marry her soon. Later that evening, gazing out the window once more, Ophelia reflects that she hasn't seen her brother with the dark butterflies since that night, wondering if the whole conversation was just her imagination. Observing him acting like a proper, teasing big brother in the daylight, she watches him confidently stand nearby as she practices. Seeing his bright, genuine smile, she safely reassures herself that he definitely isn't an enemy. Suddenly, Felix cheers triumphantly in the training field, excitedly announcing that she finally succeeded. While Felix claps for her amazing progress, her brother quickly shoots down the mood by telling her not to celebrate over something so basic. Looking proudly at a completely filled wooden bucket of water, she fiercely defends her massive magical advancement. Realizing her magic has drastically improved from a mere cup to a whole bucket, she gets a bright idea to brew her brother an extra delicious herbal tea as thanks for teaching her. Felix excitedly proposes celebrating her success with cake, making her eyes sparkle, and they happily agree to meet at the manor for tea in an hour. Laughing at their shared enthusiasm, Felix promises to place an order with the head chef, though her brother complains that they are making too big of a deal out of it. Waving goodbye, Felix announces he will head back first to prepare, leaving Ophelia and her brother to continue their training session. Ignoring her brother's advice to take a short break, a highly motivated Ophelia stubbornly refuses, declaring she wants to practice and get even better. Watching her excitedly prepare to cast another spell, he internally notes that her guard is completely and carelessly wide open. A panicked subordinate frantically bursts into the room, desperately calling out for the prince with urgent news regarding the priestess of Phrygia. The terrified man screams that the priestess slaughtered everyone, begging for help as he recalls the horrifying rumors he heard before joining House Laralake. The prince silently reflects that Ophelia's pathetically flimsy spells completely contradict the violent rumors, though he admits the situation remains undeniably suspicious. He firmly dismisses the idea of a second priestess, knowing they have already definitively confirmed that Ophelia is the only true priestess of Phrygia in existence. Staring out the window at the dark sky, the prince darkly concludes that despite her apparent weakness, they cannot ignore the lethal threat she poses to them. Completely ignoring the frantic pleas to assassinate the unprotected priestess immediately, the prince coldly orders his subordinate to stop giving him commands. Suddenly engulfed in a blinding flash of light, Ophelia instinctively unleashes a massive magical barrier that completely surprises Dark as he shields his eyes from the intense holy radiance. Elsewhere, a sinister attacker sneers from the shadows, cruelly demanding his target know their place while mocking the very idea of keeping a promise to them. The man bursts into maniacal laughter, gleefully dismissing any accusations of betrayal by claiming that ruthless deception is simply how one wins a war. Still chuckling darkly, the unseen mastermind violently commands his hidden assassins to eliminate the priestess immediately. Back at the estate, as a hidden assassin prepares to strike Ophelia, Dark slowly reaches out his hand and chillingly reminds the attacker of a promise they previously made. Completely oblivious to the lethal wind blade suddenly slicing through the air toward her back, Ophelia peacefully continues walking forward. The sudden, unnatural gust of wind violently catches Ophelia off guard, causing her to cry out as her hair whips wildly around her while Dark watches sharply. Hidden in the shadows, the frustrated elven assassin frantically questions what Dark is doing and violently demands he hurry up and finish the job. Glaring coldly, Dark silently commands the attacker to be gone while the thoroughly confused assassin wonders how her lethal spell missed its mark yet again. Glaring out from the corner of his eye at the fleeing shadow, Dark quietly admits to himself that the entire situation is making him extremely irritated. Staring down at his tightly clenched fist, Dark silently curses his ruined aim before snapping out of his dark thoughts when Ophelia innocently approaches to ask him a question. Later, while marching briskly into the bustling town, Dark firmly orders Ophelia to hurry up, leaving her flushed and panting as she complains about his impossibly fast pace. Ophelia gently chides Dark for joining her and the prince on their shopping trip, but Dark stubbornly reminds her that she was the one who practically invited him. While Dark casually dismisses the need for extra guards in the unpredictable crowd, Felix smiles warmly and confidently promises to protect Ophelia from absolutely anything. Felix proudly boasts about Ophelia's incredible cooking skills, prompting a skeptical Dark to question if a noble lady can actually cook, while Ophelia frantically begs Felix not to set the bar so impossibly high. Glaring intensely at the fresh produce, Dark challenges her with a fierce smirk, boldly declaring that her cooking better be absolutely delicious. As Felix happily requests to eat her cooking again and Dark casually chimes in, Ophelia silently panics over what she is supposed to make now that she has so foolishly agreed. Felix cheerfully points out a stall with incredibly fresh vegetables, calling Ophelia over while Dark competitively gestures toward a completely different stand. Leaving the two men to excitedly bicker over rare-colored onions, Ophelia suddenly catches a beautiful whiff of herbs and wanders toward a quaint specialty shop. The friendly shopkeeper warmly welcomes her as Ophelia marvels at a beautiful, incredibly cute pink herb carefully displayed inside a glass jar. The shopkeeper happily explains that the beautiful plant is a specially cultivated herb named Raspberry Lake, grown exclusively by the shores of Rur Lake. Offering her a steaming cup, the shopkeeper warmly invites Ophelia to sample the beautiful pale pink tea known for its signature raspberry aroma. Taking a delicate sip, Ophelia absolutely beams with pure joy as she happily declares the fragrant brew to be incredibly delicious. Suddenly appearing right beside her, Dark leans in closely and casually inspects the tea, perfectly describing its gentle sweetness and raspberry tartness. Holding the jar of herbs close to her chest, Ophelia gently reminds a highly amused Dark about her promise to brew him an exceptional herbal tea. The sweet, intimate moment is immediately shattered when an intensely jealous Felix suddenly approaches from behind and coldly demands to know what they are doing. Dark casually mocks the massive bag of groceries in Felix's arms, while Felix completely ignores him to tightly wrap a possessive arm around a highly flustered Ophelia. Smiling brightly at Felix's obvious jealousy, Ophelia proudly shows off the rare cultivated herb she found and happily suggests they go buy some meat to finish their shopping. Following her lead, they direct their attention toward a highly recommended butcher shop situated just across the lively street. The two men immediately lock eyes in a fierce, silent rivalry, stubbornly deciding to each buy their own meat to finally settle whose discerning eye is truly better. Ophelia exasperatedly calls out after the two ridiculously competitive men as they stubbornly storm off toward the butcher shop without her. Sighing fondly over her companions trying to look cool, Ophelia is suddenly interrupted when a group of rowdy local men spots her and tries to aggressively hit on her. Before the situation can escalate, Ophelia acts quickly, defensively raising her arm to physically block the aggressive thug's unwanted advance as he steps into her personal space. As the rowdy thug aggressively grabs her arm and complains about being ignored, Ophelia prepares to defend herself, only to be interrupted by a menacing voice warning the man that he will severely regret his actions. A menacing smirk spreads across a man's face as he notes his mistake, swiftly launching an attack meant to send his confused opponent flying. As a thug suddenly grabs her and confidently declares she is exactly his type, Ophelia screams in terror and tries to pull away. Exploding onto the scene, her dark-haired brother delivers a devastating, high-speed punch right to the thug's face as Ophelia flinches away. Glaring down at the fallen man with terrifying intensity, her brother growls that he must have a death wish to try and hit on his sister. Realizing the thug is already knocked out cold from a single blow, her brother casually remarks that the man can no longer hear his threats while a panicked Ophelia wonders if he went overboard. Arriving breathless and apologizing for leaving her vulnerable, Felix watches as her brother ruthlessly orders the arriving guards to drag the unconscious attacker away on charges of lèse-majesté. As the terrified guards hastily drag the man away, Ophelia watches in surprise, genuinely impressed that her brother chose the responsible route of handing the attacker over to the authorities. Expressing his gratitude, Felix casually notes it would have been a political disaster if the crown prince had publicly beaten a citizen himself, leaving Ophelia wide-eyed and questioning everything she knows. Staring up at Felix's perfectly pleasant face, she realizes she must revise her opinion of the seemingly naive prince, chillingly noting that his gentle looks might merely hide an empty interior. Holding a small paper bag of treats, Felix flashes a dazzling, picture-perfect smile and smoothly invites Ophelia to continue their walk together. Stepping between them with a firm rejection, Felix casually shuts down her brother's attempt to join hands, boldly declaring that holding Ophelia is his exclusive right as her fiancée. Pulling a deeply flushed Ophelia against his chest to claim his possessive rights, Felix maintains his pleasant smile even as her brother sharply points out that the prince's eyes remain totally cold. Glaring down at the pair, her brother internally reassesses his view of the supposedly gentle crown prince, realizing the man is fiercely and dangerously protective. Narrowing his eyes with clear irritation, her brother notes how easily the prince monopolizes the priestess, completely disregarding her own family standing right there. A dark, dangerous smirk curls across her brother's lips as he realizes dealing with this incredibly possessive prince will be far from easy. Flashing back over a decade to the Ruhr Lake Manor, a frantic maid leans out the window, desperately calling for the missing Lady Ophelia to come inside for her lessons. Crouched safely behind the garden bushes, a 6-year-old Ophelia pouts stubbornly, silently complaining that being trapped inside studying all day is simply too boring. Reasoning that her father hasn't finalized her engagement yet, she decides playing outside is much more fun and skips cheerfully along the path. Peeking curiously around a massive tree trunk, the young girl stops in her tracks as she discovers a ragged, dark-haired boy huddled miserably on the ground. Staring at the exhausted, unfamiliar boy wrapped in a tattered blanket, she curiously wonders how a complete stranger ended up sleeping in her family's garden. Hearing a loud, echoing rumble from his empty stomach, she realizes he is starving and kindly holds out a small, wrapped treat. Thrusting the snack forward with a bright, innocent smile, she tells the startled boy he can have it to ease his hunger. Tearing open the ribbon with shaking hands, the starving boy ravenously shoves the food into his mouth as a delighted Ophelia watches him eat. Leaning forward with genuine curiosity shining in her eyes, she softly asks the silent boy to tell her his name. Before the boy can force out a single sound, a maid's voice interrupts from the distance, prompting Ophelia to wonder if her new friend is completely unable to speak. Quickly intercepted by her frantic maid, Ophelia easily lies to protect the boy, claiming she has no idea who he is or where he came from. Glancing back over her shoulder as she is led away, she desperately hopes to see him again, silently promising to bring more cookies the next day. Gripping her dress tightly over her heart, the young girl feels a sudden, ominous weight as her simple plans are thrown into disarray. Jumping forward 2 whole years, a somber Ophelia reflects that despite her promise, she never saw that mysterious boy in the garden again. Just as her engagement to Felix was officially finalized, her past life memories violently resurfaced, permanently blending with her present reality. The gentle memory of the starving boy was completely buried under the weight of her past life memories, surfacing only in brief, confusing flashes out of nowhere. Snapping back to the present day, a plate of beautifully baked jam cookies sits waiting, looking identical to the treats she gave the boy so long ago. Staring in exasperation at the massive tray of cookies she just pulled from the oven, Ophelia sighs heavily, realizing she subconsciously baked an extra portion out of sheer habit. Without warning, her brother's hand smoothly swoops into view, snatching a cookie right off the plate as he cheerfully announces he will take it. Chewing happily on the delicious treat, her brother casually praises her incredible baking skills while a deeply startled Ophelia jumps at his sudden arrival. Angrily scolding him for sneaking treats and nearly giving her a heart attack, she sternly warns him that he will have to wait properly if he wants more later. Waving off her complaints with a nonchalant flick of his wrist, he shamelessly blames the incredible smell of the cookies, claiming he simply couldn't resist. Watching him casually snack, she wonders if he really loves cookies that much, suddenly struck by an intense, unexplainable wave of nostalgia from their simple banter. The sudden, loud clatter of a horse-drawn carriage arriving in the courtyard shatters her nostalgic days, immediately drawing her attention toward the window. Looking out the window alongside Felix and her brother, Ophelia watches with a soft smile as their friends and guests arrive in a bustling, lively carriage procession. While Felix casually explains he invited them after receiving an urgent letter. Felix reveals that the deadly butterflies of the moonless night are actively evolving, making the trio's presence absolutely necessary for Ophelia's protection and company during the winter vacation. Looking slightly apologetic, Felix gently admits to Ophelia that he actually wanted to tell her about their arrival much sooner. He explains he kept it a secret to prevent her from feeling overwhelmed by her daily magic and vocal practice, prompting Ophelia to gratefully thank him for his thoughtfulness. Smiling warmly to herself, Ophelia silently resolves that she absolutely does not want to be a fragile burden people constantly have to tiptoe around. She firmly decides she must become significantly stronger so Felix can rely on her and consult with her without a single moment of hesitation. Transitioning to the elegant drawing room, a warm greeting welcomes the three weary guests who have traveled from far away. The three young lords, Klaus, Erwin and Liam, bow respectfully as they are formally introduced to the household. The Duke warmly welcomes the young men to his home as the head of the house, prompting them to politely express their gratitude for the generous hospitality. The Duke formally introduces his newly adopted son, Dark Laralake, carefully noting that his official high society debut is still pending. Realizing Dark is Ophelia's new brother, an excited Erwin cheerfully hopes they can get along, a pleasantry Dark casually returns. Ophelia breathes a quiet sigh of relief, silently glad that everyone seems so entirely relaxed despite her initial lingering worries about her rough brother's behavior. Pulling her gently aside from the main group, Felix warmly squeezes Ophelia's hand and softly calls her name. Ophelia immediately reassures his silent concern with a gentle smile, confidently stating that she is completely fine. Chuckling softly at her incredible perceptiveness, Felix affectionately admits that she always manages to see right through his stoic facade. Returning to highly serious matters, Felix formally declares that they must officially announce her as the true priestess of Phrygia. Considering the rapidly escalating threat of the evolving butterflies, they both agree that sitting back is no longer an option and exposing her identity is the right call. Stealing her absolute resolve, Ophelia knocks firmly on the drawing room door, fully prepared to inform her parents and the guests about her holy magic. Stepping confidently into the room, Ophelia politely pardons the interruption and fiercely declares her intention to finally help them fight. Capturing everyone's absolute, undivided attention, a determined Ophelia announces there is something extremely important she needs to tell them all. Standing proudly before her stunned family and the guests, she reveals that the priestess of Phrygia's mark appeared on her and she has successfully awakened holy magic. She acknowledges how incredibly sudden and unbelievable the news is, but firmly insists on explaining the truth about her mark and her ultimate wish. Ophelia's father cries out her name in absolute shock, completely overwhelmed by his daughter's sudden, world-shattering divine revelation. Brimming with immense confidence, Dark smirks and casually declares his sister's new status is a proud moment, while Lady Canaria cheerfully adds that Dark's formidable capabilities make their house incredibly secure. Placing a highly reassuring hand on her delicate shoulder, Felix warmly congratulates Ophelia on her unbreakable newfound resolve. Smiling brightly, Lady Canaria urges her still-stunned husband to give his daughter his blessings, even as he stubbornly mutters that she does not need to tell him what to do. The Duke remains completely frozen in pure disbelief, silently processing the unimaginably heavy reality that his own precious daughter is the legendary priestess. A highly serious Liam directly questions the Duke, asking if he truly intends to allow Ophelia to step onto a highly dangerous battlefield. The distraught Duke fiercely protests that Ophelia is his precious light and has never seen war, declaring that as a parent he simply cannot throw her into mortal danger. Cutting sharply through his desperate, fearful protests, Ophelia firmly calls out to her father to stop his spiraling panic. She gently admits she was also initially shocked to discover the mark, but fiercely declares her inexperience will absolutely not stop her from protecting their country. Looking directly into her horrified father's eyes, she passionately states that if this is Goddess Phrygia's true wish, she intends to fulfill it completely. Defeated by her absolute, unwavering resolve, the Duke lets out a heavy sigh and astonishingly accepts that her mind is firmly made up. Taking a calm sip of his tea, Liam admits he never imagined Ophelia would be the priestess, but promises to fully support her by teaching her all the history and magic she needs. As a naturally curious priest, Liam eagerly leans forward and asks Ophelia exactly how the divine mark first appeared on her body. Ophelia explains that her maid Karen noticed it first, prompting Erwin to excitedly note that the mark's existence is undeniable since a third party verified it, though Ophelia admits she remains extremely cautious of Lady Alicia. Snapping his fingers with fiery, burning enthusiasm, Erwin loudly declares he completely understands the situation and eagerly promises to clear the dangerous path Ophelia must walk. Klaus adjusts his glasses and calmly assures the Duke that Ophelia's inspiring dedication has deeply moved them, meaning protecting her will be a matter of absolute joy. Looking directly at the deeply concerned Duke, Felix firmly states that the three guests and himself are completely united in their ironclad resolve. Placing a hand securely over his heart, Felix smiles warmly and makes an unbreakable, absolute vow to protect Ophelia with everything they possess. Bowing low with solemn respect, the man asks if they will truly entrust her to their care. A father firmly but graciously requests that they take excellent care of his beloved daughter. Pulling Ophelia into a tight embrace, her father begs her not to do anything reckless while she brightly promises she won't. Looking back at her warmly smiling parents, Ophelia sincerely thanks them for allowing her to step forward and fight as the priestess. During a serious strategy meeting, an official notes that it is fortuitous the Crown Prince is present because alarming reports of higher variants are flooding in from the provinces. Adjusting his glasses, the official grimly warns that a higher variant could instantly wipe out a village, declaring their primary goal is to investigate the site and crush the threat with full force. A tactical breakdown reveals that while the butterflies started as harmless low-level mobs, they have violently evolved into much stronger threats as the situation progresses. Looming over the discussion is the terrifying threat of a colossal higher variant, a boss monster powerful enough to completely swallow the world. Staring down with a deeply troubled expression, Ophelia is jolted from her creeping dread when a quiet voice asks if they can truly win this fight. Looking up, she finds the four young men gazing back at her with unwavering confidence and softly reassuring smiles. A profound sense of relief washes over her as she realizes she is no longer fighting entirely by herself, remembering their fierce promise to protect her with everything they possess. Tears of genuine gratitude well up in her wide eyes as her inner resolve finally solidifies. Flashing a breathtakingly radiant smile, she lets her happy tears fall freely as she fully embraces her new reality. Throwing a hand excitedly into the air, one of her companions boldly proposes they crush the butterflies entirely and seize their true happy ending. Leaning forward with an eager grin, he cheerfully asks Ophelia if she wants to head out tomorrow and start investigating. Blinking in mild surprise at the sudden enthusiastic shift in momentum, Ophelia echoes his suggestion with a delightfully stunned expression.